ఊకినే కూర్చుంటాం ఇక అంతేనా అక్కడ ఇక్కడ కూర్చుంటాం. నేను 10th ఫ్లోర్కి పోవాలి ఇప్పుడు, అక్కడ ప్రాబ్లం ఉంటుంది.
I think that this discussion is going to be quite interesting, considering that we have a lot of information compiled in this book with all kinds of people, including chapters written by those and also chapters written by those who criticize the other chapter writers. So, it's quite interesting to come. I know Jenny was struggling. She was always saying, should we publish or should we not publish? It will become controversial. Everybody will, ask questions and all that. And after a lot of thought, she decided to give a chapter to conversations. So please don't blame, this is not the last word. So, Rahul, thank you very much for joining. I'm sure it's not a good time for you.
It's not too, it might be worse for Deepak. It's just 10 p.m. for me, so it's not too bad.
Okay.
But it's just Friday night, so through a wrench in my wild party plans, that's all. But happy to be here.
Hi, good afternoon, good morning, Deepak, and I don't know what time for you it is.
It's 5 a.m. Just starting, but it's glad to be part of this.
So, will you go to sleep after this, or you haven't? You early rise?
Oh well, yeah. Usually wake up 6 a.m. So it's an hour early. That's okay.
Great, thank you very much. So we will start. We have about less than 1.5 hours. We will do half an hour, 45 minutes of people who have written chapters in this one to speak a little bit. And then we have the conversation on this topic of data justice. I will first request Jenny and Anantu to start off with an introduction, and then we go to the other panel.
Yes. Hello everyone, I'm Jenny. I work with Digital Empowerment Foundation with the research team. So this book was part of a research we actually did in collaboration with Alan Turing Institute and GPI, where we looked at different narratives of automation and how the application of automated system or AI-powered system in a social setup, what are the impacts of it. So we interviewed a lot of people, including people from impacted communities, advocates of digital rights, even policy makers, people from the government. So it's really a dialogue which then were converted into chapters. So the book, that is why the title Conversations, because it was a conversation between different people and then that was later converted into So the book, that's one obvious limitation of the book is that it is also not giving a unified perspective or viewpoint. That way it is representing diverse voices of people. I'll just give an overview of what do we mean by data justice. It's also a new term. So the proliferation of digital data has benefited various stakeholders, including the state, the private sector, and even ordinary citizens who now enjoy unprecedented ease in accessing information and services. From customized suggestions in our social media to the best song recommendation, from accurate weather forecast prompting us to carry umbrellas, editing and typing, creating content quicker than ever, data-driven technologies have revolutionized our everyday life. While data-powered technologies rule the world, there are simultaneous processes to establish the rule of law for its use. However, for the vast majority of citizens, it is still an uncharted territory. We do not know what happens to the vast amount of data that is being collected from us, how our identities are used to profile us in specific ways, how is it restricting our social media usage, and what happens to it if it reaches the people in power who might disagree with our digital data, including our opinions. Data processing technologies are by no means unbiased or neutral. In fact, people who are already historically marginalized often end up at the receiving end of unequal or biased datification. In light of this concern, this edited volume seeks to assemble a multitude of perspectives and insights from diverse stakeholders on data-driven technologies and systems. I request my co-editor Anandu to take it.
Hi, I'm Anandu. I work with the Data Justice Project as a consultant for DEF. Jenny has started introduction. So we are in a transitory stage of adopting and adapting to these new AI technologies. And as we were reminded the day before in the academic paper discussions that happened in this room only, this transitory phase is when we need the most critical inputs to ensure there is justice as we begin to live with these technologies. There have been several discussions in academic work on different perspectives on AI, like the feminist perspective. So our work with the Allen Turing Institute is an extension of this, adding intersectional aspects like decoloniality. So in this long history of colonial use of technology to discipline vernaculars and let's say gain control of information economy of the people, how could we see this new attempts at automation and digitization? So what happens when we force this digital on the poorest and most marginalized sections? Where does it leave space for any redress or communication? And also, to move forward, do we only look at these aspects from a critical lens, or can we also look at other ways of reimagining data and along with it the frameworks also, so that it can be in line with social justice and equality? So for our initial report that we worked on, we talked to people who are asking these questions and also attempting at building solutions. And then we asked if they could detail it with more deeper and more personal narrative, which is what we have in this book here today. So the formal book launch had already, it happened yesterday. So today we now have the authors here. So we invite the authors to speak about the contents along with, we have also other distinguished guest speakers.
So the way we planned it is that the speakers would be, the authors can talk about their chapters, then the respondents can actually respond to the chapters and have a 45-minute discussion. I'll just introduce the speakers and the discussants. Sure. So Rakshita is here. Rakshita works with National Law School of India, but is also importantly the founder and head of the Social Accountability Fund for Action and Research, SUFFER, where she along with her team works on building rule-based public accountability frameworks and has worked on social audits for NREGA along with other work on RTI and RTW campaigns. Salahuddin ji is here. Salahuddin ji is a union leader and an organizer. He's the National General Secretary of IFAD and founder state president of Telangana Gig and Platform Workers Union. Srinivas is here. Srinivas is an independent researcher based in Hyderabad who has written extensively on Aadhaar privacy, data rights and surveillance. Nikhil Day is here, who is the founding member of Mazdoor Kisan Shakti Sangathan and an active part of the Right to Information movement in India.
So we have other authors who are joining us online. So we have Rahul, who is the founding Chief Research and Innovation Officer at Vartmani AI, and he also led a team that looked into using AI for social good in India, worked with the Niti Aayog and to help write India's AI policy, and he's presently the co-founder of Tendril AI based in San Francisco. We have Professor Deepak, who is teaching at the Queen's University in Belfast, who works on and has written extensively technical and very accessible content on ethical AI and fairness of machine learning algorithms. We are expecting Abdul, who has also written, who is a researcher at Bridge University in Amsterdam. He has written on the politics of citizenship, the NRC, and the exclusions that come along from it.
We also have a few guest speakers. So Nikita is here. Nikita is the co-founder of the Criminal Justice and Police Accountability Project, a Bhopal-based litigation and research intervention focused on building accountability against criminalization of oppressed caste communities by the police and the criminal justice system. We also have Sonia George, who's been with us for the past few days. She's the founder and executive director of Global Digital Inclusion Partnership, and she's also, mostly worked on digital divide and gender. She was also the co-founder and executive director of the Alliance for Affordable Internet.
We have also some discussants who agreed to join us. We have Kavita Iyer, who is an editor in Article 14 and is written on India's farm crisis, land rights, land reform, farmer suicides, distress migration, etc. Swati is an independent social science researcher and educator who works on identity, migration, culture and community. She has also worked with the Campbell Foundation on developing a research protocol for evidence gap mapping. Not here yet.
So we invite the authors to briefly speak about their chapters, after which we can have some more questions to discuss. So Rakshita, if we can start.
Yeah, Rakshita and Nikhil both can start here.
So I'll start and leave to receive the chapter. So so firstly, just to start actually with the title of the book, Conversations is really a good idea, because I think many of these conversations are needed. There's a lot we need to learn from each other, even though we know we come from even diametrically opposite perspectives. We are dealing with a new animal, which is, or a new, we call it a virus, certainly a new animal. And I think we need to understand, even though often the lens by which we understand people is we know where they're coming from and which interests they are, and I want to state my interests as well. But when we come to an issue of justice, something that I raised yesterday, I'd like to keep that in the conversation, that at least in India today, because so many of us are trying to protect the constitutional framework, I would like to say that at least fundamental rights, but the overall framework of the constitution is something that in the Indian conversation we have to keep to, otherwise we have nothing to tether ourselves to. And those are things that within our framework, it's something that we came together to say, what is India? I'm saying this at the beginning because I think that's a very important political question. It's a question that if it gets marginalized, then everything is open and you can do what you like and use things the way you like, and we are only a subset, all of us, a subset of a certain conversation and an agreement at the end of a very big conversation of the national movement and what is India, we came to a certain agreement of what India is. In that, of course, there can be debates and arguments, but at least I want to state that that's something that I see as being extremely important of saying that this is where the basis on which I say some of the things I do. The second is that I think where the issue that I am looking at, which is the governing of data governance. Who actually, by governing meaning who is at it. So these terms which are used of good governance, which I feel again is not an idea I've discussed so much in this, but I do want to put it forward in this conversation, is that it's a very neutral kind of term and it is actually politically mischievous. Because it does not, governance can be anything then, and good governance can be anything, and rule of law is similarly to the today lawfare has become such a terrible means by which I can be incarcerated under patently unjust laws, and my argument against that unjust law is that I am in violation of the law, whereas that law is not justice. That law, so similarly, governance is not in and of itself okay. So I would prefer to call it democratic governance, even though there are many further qualifications that need to be made, but definitely rather than good governance, because especially when it comes to data, good governance becomes a very convenient label, because it's good for anyone who holds that data. There are three ways in which, to me, big data, metadata is used, and metadata is a centralizing force. That, I mean, I would love to have a conversation if someone says it isn't, but there is no doubt that it is centralizing, and therefore it comes with everything that when you centralize in a democracy, what it means. What it takes away from the individual, what it gives all communities, and what it gives to people who govern, in a democracy, govern in our name. So the framework of governing in someone's name. And big data goes beyond, it is all political, but it goes beyond just governance. It goes into the commercial sphere, which I won't so much touch upon. There are many people, but there is that complete combination between governing people and commercially and powerful people, the corporate sector basically, but those who control the market. So this combination between the market and governance, which we have seen in neoliberal times. And then there are the administrators, who all of us deal with, who are actually they are the ones who we think are doing everything, and they are a kind of management. And this layer of management is again something I'd like to touch upon. How much time should we have? 5 minutes?
5 minutes.
Yeah, so I'll just quickly now go into 2-3 things that these areas. So my perspective comes from very much a grassroots perspective. Very much grassroots doesn't mean that I'm just in one area. Grassroots means that those millions and crores or billions or whatever people who are all over, what they feel on their skin every day. And that comes from seeing it in 1, 2, 10 places, but seeing how this applies in many places, and which is why the experience from the Right to Information Law or the National Rural Employment Guarantee or the Food Security Act, these are the examples I'll give just very quickly. So what I suggested yesterday, and I really would like to sell this point in a sense over and over again, is what we are talking about, does it enhance the rights in our constitution, the fundamental rights, or does it curtail them? That is one lens through which, or one evaluator through which I think we need to see whatever it is that we are doing, both for the gathering of data, the management of data, and the use of data, and big data as well. There's another big perspective I'd like to bring in from the Right to Information, not from India, but from South Africa's constitution, which followed India's Right to Information law, where they put it into the constitution that every citizen will have the right to information to enhance any other right. So that qualified it in a beautiful way, in my opinion, because the right to information in and of itself means nothing. It can be used any which way. so does data. Data can be used anywhere. What is it being used for? By whom? How? That qualifier that was there in the South African Constitution is extremely important. Now I just want to go into some specifics. One perspective on RTI, and I'll just take 2 minutes. One perspective on RTI is a question of when we come to management, we all deal with management information systems all over. As data came in, right to information was affected by that everything was being digitized. And therefore, RTI did only one thing. It said what is with government will be available to people through an RTI application. And what did government do? It digitized everything and hid them behind admin laws. So they actually violated the RTI in one stroke through management information systems. But in a management perspective comes many things. It's management for the manager. And that manager has a boss, a political boss or a commercial boss or both. It is not from what we want to build as a Janata information system. And now I'll just give you some meta violation examples. We have that whole perspective of, that architecture is policy and code is law. How we have faced that over and over again. One, I'd like to talk about National Food Security Act, 3 quick examples. NFSA says, okay, we'll gather big data to decide who will be on the NFSA beneficiary list or not. They gather the big data. People don't get access to that. Aadhaar, which maybe Srinivas or someone, I won't go into it, excludes millions of people. Millions of people get excluded because they say, we will improve this through technology. And they're still improving it and people are getting excluded. But the data itself, today in Rajasthan's database, automatic inclusion is supposed to be there of all those who are either disability pensioners or old age pensioners. 9 lakh old age pensioners are not in the list, 4 lakh disability pensioners are not in the list. That data is not made public. They can't even fight using the data, but they should have a legitimate right. So you're claiming to gather it for one reason, but the politics doesn't let you do it, so you don't do it. So what the hell is the use of this? It's only for the use of management. It is not being able to be used by people, and it's taken a huge RTI battle to get it into the public domain. Similarly, in National Food Security Act, the law says anyone, let's say I am one of those 4 lakh, and I show my disability certificate, and first call is for me to be on the Food Security Act thing. I show my certificate, I have an appeal, but no, your data is closed. The site is closed. Government of India has said, we will not let a single person in. So everyone on the ground in Rajasthan, in a village, will tell you, ki abhi to band hai site. They use the language saying that the site is closed, so you can't appeal. So your legal right to appeal is taken away by a code which says that you cannot enter this to even make the appeal. MG and REJs, yesterday I gave the examples, but I just want to end by that, the saying that we built something, attempted to build something like a Janata information system. That is to say that we work out how once this data is collected, because we have no choice but to try and work. If it's taken away from us, we have to try and work to get it back, to put it to use for ourselves. And in the digital data protection law, Akshata will talk about it more, but I just want to say there are ways and means, and we are enjoying to be able to do it. Huh? Sorry.
So, what would be the percentage of effectiveness?
We will take the question.
Okay.
If possible, 4-5 can have some people accommodated here.
Yeah, we can stand there, no
Chairs
problem.
outside.
We can pull some chairs.
No, don't pull chair. I mean, it's better to stand.
We'll stand.
Yeah.
उम्र फट जा रहा है बैठ के.
Right.
Yeah, I'm just conscious that like 8-9 speakers.
I'll just time it down, time it like 5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll try to take lesser. I'll build on this conversation largely because this is also something that we started talking about yesterday. While it's not all that the chapter deals with, but really is there a conflict, is there a balance between privacy and disclosure of information? And of course the kind of experience and the position the position through which we are speaking is that we really feel there is a creative tension between privacy and disclosure. We don't believe there can be this neat, fine distinction of This is where privacy ends, public disclosure starts. And this tension is very necessary in a democratic society. And the norms of what is private, what is public is something that has to be determined by the people. And it has to be revisited by people in society on an ongoing basis because it's negotiated. So the last situation we want to be in is the state telling us this is private and this is public, which is exactly what the Digital Personal Data Protection Bill, Act, sorry. Please remind myself it's legislation now. That's what the Act has done, where the state is defining for us, this is what is private and this is what is public, and this is how the state and every other entity or a person needs to, what it needs to do to protect that information. While our yesterday's workshop discussed a portal where information is disclosed in the public domain, today we have public hearings. We have a public hearing on the impact of digitalization and information that people negotiate with. And there are 3 parameters through which we really try and assess. And it's also to state that it's not that those of us advocating for right to information disregard the right to privacy. We do have utmost respect for people's right to information that should be private, and it's nobody's business to know who went to the hospital for what purpose, but it's a different conversation of how much money went into the hospital, what kind of equipment is there in the hospital. That, for instance, is very public information. 3 parameters that we feel really help define for ourselves and what we fight for and advocate for in terms of what information should be private and what information should be public. Does withholding that information empower me or disempower me? Does disclosing that information actually strengthen my pursuit of justice or dignity, or does it curtail it? And does disclosure of that information actually enable, actually reveal distribution of public resources or hides distribution of public resources? So our argument of why public fund distribution, whether it's to NFSA, pension, or other entitlements, why it needs to be in the public domain of who got what is because this is public fund, because somebody is getting, somebody else is not getting. So that how that resource has been distributed, it reveals that, and hiding that would actually disempower conversations in a democratic society. And we completely disagree that only information related to the poor and only of schemes should be in the public domain. We have fought very hard for mining information to be in the public domain, mining leaseholders, how much money they are getting, and that's not entitlement holders. So this idea that this disclosure only applies to the poor is something that we strongly disagree with and resist, and we are part of struggles where we're saying that the information of the most endowed is also in the public domain. And there's the last thing that I want to end with is there was a legal framework, there is a legal framework, the Right to Information Act, where this negotiated balance between what is privacy, what is should be disclosed was something that was crafted and put in legalese out of campaigns' demand. Section 81J clarified that there is certain information that is private, but if that information is in public interest, if that information can be given to a legislator, there were exemptions which said that if you can prove that this information has a public bearing, then it should be disclosed in the public domain, which is why the Prime Minister's degree is no one's private information. If it's information mentioned in an affidavit on which they were sworn and an election took place, it's not private information, which is what the government is arguing in court. So I just want to end with there was a negotiated understanding which was in law, which is exactly what the Digital Personal Data Protection Act removed and amended, because they understood that was the core of where the balance was.
I think that also clarifies the questions we had in the last workshop, that it's being taken forward from there. I want to move to Salahuddin ji.
थैंक यू। जैसे कि टाइटल के अंदर ही देखेंगे आप डेटा जस्टिस, तो हमारा फाइट एक लॉन्ग फाइट है डेटा को लेकर, मल्टीपल टाइम्स एग्रीगेटर कंपनीज से फाइट कर रहे हैं। आप देखे होंगे एग्रीगेटर कंपनी चाहे लाइक ओला, उबर, स्विगी, जोमेटो, अमेजोन, फ्लिपकार्ट, ये वर्कर्स का डेटा लेके अपनी अपनी दुकान चलाते रहते हैं। एट द सेम टाइम जब वर्कर पूछता कि ये डेटा मेरे को चाहिए, मैं कितने साल से काम कर रहा हूँ, कितना लॉन्ग टाइम पे काम कर रहा हूँ, कितने घंटे काम कर रहा हूँ, तो वो डेटा उसको खुद का डेटा खुद को नहीं मिलता। तो ये बहुत बड़ा सवाल आज भी अधूरा है। मल्टीपल टाइम्स हम लोग ने कंपनीज़ के साथ पूछा कि आप क्यों डेटा हमारा डेटा हमें नहीं मिलता। इवन दो जब आप राजस्थान में देखे होंगे जो सोशल सिक्योरिटी वहाँ पे राजस्थान के अंदर जो कानून बना, लॉ बना, उसके अंदर अगर जब आप देखेंगे तो हम लोग बहुत ही दूर की सोच लगाते हुए रक्षिता जी और निखिल सर ने वहाँ पे हेल्प किया कि एक डाटा चीज़ हम लोग ने वहाँ पे डाल के रखा कि आप हमारा डेटा हमारे को देना पड़ेगा। तो कानून में लाने के लिए भी हम लोग एग्रीगेटर कंपनी से लगातार बैक टू बैक फाइट करते रह रहे हैं। ये हमारी एक लंबी लड़ाई है, बट इसके अंदर जहाँ तक एक देखेंगे तो राजस्थान का एक पहला एक जीत है कि उसके अंदर हम लोग उसको इन्वॉल्व कर पाए। मगर एट द सेम टाइम यही है कि उसको लेके एग्रीगेटर कंपनीज अपने ओन हब्स बना सकता, अपना ओन जो है वेयर हाउसेस लगा सकता, इंस्टामार्ट्स लगा सकता, और कस्टमर से भी डेटा लेके उसको क्या चाहिए क्या नहीं चाहिए वो सब कुछ पता है उसको, और वो अपनी मर्जी माफिक काम करता डेटा को लेके। बट वो डेटा किसका है एंड ऑफ द टाइम? अगर जब मेरा डेटा ले रहे तो मेरे को देना चाहिए, अगर कस्टमर का डेटा ले रहे तो कस्टमर अगर जब पूछने पे देना चाहिए, मगर वो नहीं मिलता। फेयर ट्रांजेक्शन्स नहीं है। अगर जब मेरा फेयर अगर जब सोचो कैलकुलेशन के अंदर 150 रुपये मेरे को बता रहा, आपको 200 रुपये बता रहा, तो कभी कभी बहस हो जाती कैब ड्राइवर्स में, डिलीवरी बॉयज़ में, मल्टीपल आर्ग्यूज हो जाते हैं। आप लोग भी बेहतर जानते होंगे। ये चीज़ ट्रांसपेरेंसी नहीं है। और एल्गोरिथम एक ऐसा बड़ा सवाल है। मैं और मेरे साथ साथी और एक खड़े के हैं, तो मैं 5 घंटे से मैं वेटिंग कर रहा हूँ, बुकिंग मेरे को नहीं आती, मगर मेरे साथी अभी 10-15 मिनट पहले आते, मगर उनको बिजनेस आ जाता। तो ये पूरा बिजनेस का एल्गोरिथम जो डिसाइड करने वाले कौन है? एग्रीगेटर कंपनीज है। तो जब ये लोग बोलते कि आप फ्रीलांसर है, अपनी मर्जी माफिक काम कर सकते, ऐसा कुछ नहीं है, क्योंकि एग्रीगेटर्स कंपनीज जो है अपने मर्जी माफिक काम कराने के लिए इंसेंटिव स्ट्रक्चर्स में बांध के रखते और एल्गोरिथम में बांध के रखते। अगर जब मैं घर जाना चाह रहा हूँ, गो होम लगा लेके, फिर भी नहीं जा सकता हूँ, क्योंकि मेरे को अगर जब मैं एक रूट पे जाना चाह रहा हूँ तो वो रूट को डिवाइड करके दूसरे रूट पे देते, मैं जाना ही नहीं चाह रहा हूँ, मैं डिले कर रहा हूँ तो राइट कैंसिल करने पे मेरी आईडी ब्लॉक करी जाती। तो ये मल्टीपल जो है बैक टू बैक, अगर जब आप कंपनीज के साथ देखेंगे तो हमने बहुत सारी बार सरकार तक भी लेके गई, सरकार को बोले कि हम लोग इसके ऊपर आवाज़ उठना चाहिए, हमारे डेटा हमारे को मिलना चाहिए, ये हमारा राइट है, मगर सरकार भी सुनने के लिए नहीं है। हम लोग तो मल्टीपल टाइम्स रिप्रेजेंटेशन दे के थक गए। अब तो यूनियन अपना फाइट तो कर रहा, मगर एक राजस्थान एक ऐसी चीज़ है, राजस्थान में हमें वो एक चीज़ हमें वहाँ पे एक देखने के लिए मिली डेटा के ऊपर। अगर जब राजस्थान का बिल पढ़ेंगे तो आज के तारीख में इंडिया के पास हमारे पास एक ही कानून बचा हो राजस्थान का, तो ये लेके हम लोग पूरे स्टेट्स में घूम रहे, अभी बोल रहे कि दूसरे स्टेट्स भी इसको इम्प्लीमेंटेशन करो। जैसा कि आप देखेंगे बेंगलुरु, कर्नाटक भी रेडी हो गया कि इसके ऊपर कुछ काम करने के लिए। वहाँ पे भी परसों ILO के मीटिंग में एडिशनल कमिश्नर बोला कि 90% काम वहाँ पे भी हो गया ऑलमोस्ट। तो हम यही एक्सपेक्ट कर रहे कि हम हर शहर में जाए, हर स्टेट में जाए, और सेंट्रल गवर्नमेंट को भी यही बोल रहे कि हमारा राजस्थान का मॉडल लेके अप्लाई करो, आप इससे बेहतर काम करने की कोशिश करिए, ना कि उसको अंदर कुछ कट करके उसको और कम करने का, ऐसा नहीं करना चाहिए। और बढ़ के दे सकते तो आप इसके अंदर बेहतरीन हो सकता। तो ये सरकार से भी लड़ाई एक तरफ से चल रही है, एग्रीगेटर कंपनी से भी हमारी लड़ाई लगातार ये चलते रह रही। तो ये हमारे लिए भी चैलेंज है। ये चैलेंज को हम लोग कहाँ तक हो सके वहाँ तक एज ए यूनियंस हम लोग लगातार इसके ऊपर फाइट करते रह रहे हैं, सिविल सोसाइटी ऑर्गेनाइजेशंस का, NGOs का, और बहुत सारे जनों का जो है हेल्प लेते रहे इसके अंदर। बट अभी ये लड़ाई चलते रहेंगी जब तक हमारा हक नहीं लेंगे हम, ये तो उसको रोकेंगे तो नहीं, बट इसके ऊपर तो लड़ना ही पड़ेगा। आप सबका भी सपोर्ट चाहिए। थैंक यू।
Can you speak in 1 or 2 sentences for Sonia?
Just don't worry.
Don't worry, I'll look through the chapters. I already did.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I wanted to bring Nikita now to the conversation. I mean, you're also dealing with the criminalized communities.
Yes.
So, can you also talk a bit about how the collection of the historical records of criminalized, people's data. or caste data, when you're actually making cohesive systems around it, what do you think are the dangers?
So I think I first want to start by saying that all data is caste data. It's not just police data that is caste data. It's in fact the kinds of data that we're speaking to is caste that is masquerading now as various kinds of data points. And we've seen that very, very clearly in the context of policing, where historically, this has been done to create this category of, people who are criminals by birth. Scores of nomadic, semi-nomadic communities, including trans communities. And this data has been historically stored and identified as criminal data, right? So it's also that sort of loop where if you look a certain way, that is considered to be evidence of criminality, but it's also, you're also collecting data about a certain kind of people to corroborate your claim, right? So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy. And I think this kind of work that has happened and also happened in a very localized way, because this kind of data with the police has been maintained in local police stations. I mean, now in today's parlance we call them, history sheets, we call them rowdy registers, gunda registers, things that have also made it to our everyday parlance and vocabulary, right, in the way that we're navigating the world. Like, we don't think, like each time, we want to refer to someone who is considered like, who's badly behaved, we'll say, oh, this person is a rowdy, or this person acts like a gunda. But these are categories that have been cultivated through the collection of various kinds of data about communities who are oppressed caste communities. So I think what we are seeing now, particularly, what has happened, the sort of beginning of this was with Aadhaar, but I think it's important to understand the discriminatory design of these systems historically, because once we're, when we put it in that context, what we're seeing very, very clearly is that we're dealing with systems that are actually old wine in a new bottle, right? Because this kind of, what had happened also during the pandemic with the MHA saying now we're going to build these centralized databases. With the ICJS, we want to link various kinds of databases, create interoperability in data between the police, the judiciary, and the prison system. We're seeing that kind of free flow of data within the policing system has always happened. And there is a process now of centralizing that. In fact, we see this as people who work with criminalized communities. We're seeing how every aspect of people's lives has been turned into a data point, right? Like in several criminalized communities, also known as the denotified tribes, even now if somebody is going to get married, they're required to submit an application in the local police station along with the wedding invite and the guest list, because the police needs to know that if there is a congregation, what is this congregation doing. So we're seeing that, caste and various forms of livelihoods of these communities have been turned into data points, which has then been deemed as evidence of criminality. But I also want to very quickly speak to the politics of data collection, right? Because I think something that Rakshita was also alluding to earlier is, what do you conceal and what do you disclose, right? And we've seen that happening particularly in the recent past with the caste census. When Bihar conducted the caste census and it was challenged in court, the petitioners made an argument saying that this data should not be collected because this is a violation of privacy. Now it's very interesting how the privacy argument was utilized in this particular case to stop an exercise of data collection, right? Because this is data that is naming, the sort of disproportionate access of resources that certain communities, who although less in number, have been able to amass, right? The way in which it's data that underscores the inequitable, access to resources and the kind of discrimination that has been meted out to certain communities historically, and therefore there have been these attempts to sort of scuttle this exercise. The last sort of caste census data that we have available is from 1931. So I think it's important to speak about, what kind of data is important, the state wants to create and use and weaponize in certain ways, and what kind of data it is desperate to keep buried for a very long time. And I think, because in the introduction also, you guys spoke about how this particular volume is thinking about, decolonial or feminist perspectives on data collection. I think there's an important need to perhaps situate the idea of, how does one think about the Brahminical origins of data itself. So, make decolonization and that kind of feminist understanding to tie it with the project of de-Brahmanization, which has always been the ethos of data collection.
Next, if Srinivas could speak on.
Okay, so I want to continue some of the points that Nikhil and Rashta raised. See, the Aadhaar program was never a single system, right? It was an architecture. It was like Nikhil raises the point of Code's law. Like a lot of the tech communities in India about this, how when you design systems like Aadhaar, we really don't know what's in it. It's a black box in some sense. But that is happening because you're treating humans as numbers and you're not treating them as humans, which is where what I speak about when you treat humans as data and datafication of humans itself is. So how do you then let humans have control over data? The only way to do that is to actually give control to humans. But this is being assumed in a sense that when we talk about privacy, it's always been talked about individual control of their own data. And that is something that I want to set straight, that privacy is a collective right. It is not an individual right. I mean, not only an individual right. So you can, when we talk about privacy, privacy is often confused with secrecy or anonymity. The fundamental right to privacy in India does not guarantee anonymity in India. Both the Puttaswamy judgments in fact recognize identity. The Aadhaar project exists for a reason, right? So we do not have a right to anonymity. So this confusion of what is privacy is not often made clear. In fact, the legal community does not understand many aspects of software at large, right? And it's actually the community folks who have been educating advocates that do not think of privacy as secrecy. And the current court case in Supreme Court around the electoral bonds is where now you're suddenly looking at all of this. Coming back to the issue with controls of who gets to control data, I think it's been fairly made clear that when the Aadhaar system was being implemented, they had this language of empowerment. We're going to use data for empowerment, right? So all of your Aadhaar data will be used to empower you. But that never really happened because we didn't know what data was being collected, A. And B, they would never, the idea of empowerment was never from a community lens, from a collective rights sense, right? It was empowerment of somebody who has access to this data. It was never and when you don't have access to this data, there's no idea of empowerment. So when you look at models like smart cities, so within cities, with the idea of urban development, we do delineation of slums. And you can only recognize what is a slum based on budgets that are available. If there is no budget for slum rehabilitation, there are no slums in the city. Because if you suddenly say there are slums and there's no budget to rehabilitate them, then the courts will like, oh, you recognize there are so many slums in your city and so many people who are living in bad conditions, and what are you doing about it, right? So the idea of data collection in itself and what you would recognize as slums, or what you would recognize as gig workers, whom would you recognize as a gig worker, and how do you create these data sets itself is very faulty in that sense. And the only way you can change this setup is give back control. And it's been some of the things that I've been trying to raise, and like if you look at different models now, there are these ideas of how to create or how to think about alternatives to Aadhaar. Aadhaar is a model, it's not one database. You're applying that model everywhere, in health, in land, in digitization, everywhere, right? So, and this model is failing in some scenarios, and it is working well in some scenarios. And they are really unsure where it would function or where it would fail, and the only way to know that is experiment it on us. What we are offering is, why don't you let people decide that? If you're doing digitization of land, for example, there are many land communities who would claim different land rights. Tribal groups, for example, have forest rights where they claim rights over commons lands, temple lands, right? But suddenly you say, I'm going to use Aadhaar to digitize everything, or apply the Aadhaar model in land. You have created so many of those problems. So in terms of discussing the model and alternatives for models, New Zealand, the Maori tribe, for example, has come up with a method where they have this data stored. Because under the New Zealand's constitution, the Maori tribe has constitutional rights, and they are extending that to data, where any data that the state of New Zealand has with regards to the Maori Maori tribe, they are taking over control over their own data, and then deciding that as a community, as a tribe, what are we going to do, how are we going to use this data for our own empowerment, right? So this idea of empowerment that the state talks about from an individual sense versus a collective empowerment that a group decides. And we have so many social groups in India, right? And unless we are talking about bringing all these social groups to the table and letting them have certain form of control as a collective, I'm not talking about individuals from a privacy lens. And that is failed unless we get that kind of social participation at a certain level in the digitization process. We cannot have any form of data justice. And these problems that have come up with Aadhaar will extend to every other digitization from now on, including your systems of artificial intelligence and automation, robotics, whatever you want to build. These problems will continue to exist. Yeah, gig workers primarily. Every system that you're talking, right? Like any land, gig workers, health, cities, agriculture, you name it. This is going to extend because you're applying one model and you're forcing it down, and which is where the humanization of data needs to happen. And the only way that you can do this is you have to let people from different communities actually take control.
Can we have Rahul?
We would like to go to the screen. Rahul, would you like to come in and take your few minutes?
Thank you. Let's see. I bring in my perspective as someone who's a technologist who has worked extensively in building technology for explicit social good. I did that for close to 10 years, and then the last couple of years I've been focused on robotics and not necessarily explicitly focused on social good, but out here in Silicon Valley, and I draw on these experiences of technologies that have scaled to over 40 countries and a few million users and so on. I'll start by acknowledging something that Nikhil said right in the beginning, which is none of what we talk about matter if this is not in the framework of a constitutional democracy, right? Then all bets are off. If that's off, all bets are off. Sitting at this point here in Silicon Valley, I have to say some of the things in the chapter already feel dated. Right? Technology is progressing very, very fast. And on the other hand, there are some things that remain that still remain true, and I'll touch upon both of these. Many of you know about the tremendous tech progress that's happening. I have close visibility into a bunch of this stuff with everything that's happening with large language models. Today we have systems that can you have systems that can write code. You have systems that can rewrite their own code, right? Reprogram themselves. We have robots walking around in factories. Not wide, there aren't too many of them out there yet, but that's going to change. And I look out this window and I can see self-driving cars driving by. And I just have to book an app on my phone and I can take a ride in there. Right? So things are changing very fast, right? And these things will hit all corners of the globe. Looking at all this stuff happening, it is not out of the realm of imagination that we can see a future of abundance possible, right? The possibilities are clear. What is less clear to me is if it is a future of abundance for all. Because historically we have not been very good at distributing any form of abundance fairly. Having said that, I'll also go to some things that were written in the chapter that I would say still hold true. I'll start with something my friend Kentaro Toyama said, which is that technology is ultimately an amplifier of human intent. Right? So back in the day, when we discovered fire, we could use it to cook food, have light at night, fend off wild animals, and we could set fire to the neighboring village. Right? The story of technology remains the same. It remains only an amplifier of human intent. Now, generally, the history of it has been you develop stuff, you deploy carefully, and as you see bad things happening, you re-engineer so that you minimize, you put systems in place, not just technological solutions. Often they aren't just technological solutions. You put systems in place to minimize the bad and maximize the good. But all this makes sense only in a situation of positive intent. And digital technologies, this is also generally been true of technology, but digital technologies in particular have the potential to bring disproportionate power to governments over citizens because of the very nature of how centralizing it can be. Right? I also want to acknowledge that in the context of the developing countries, the technology has tremendous potential, right? And this is some of the work that, for example, we were doing at Vardhani AI. We were developing new technology for identifying TB patients, huge health burden in India. We were working on identifying low birth weight babies, again, tremendous health burden. We worked on solutions that actually help the yield for cotton farmers by preventing pest attacks and so on. So tons of possibilities exist, useful things that can be done with technology. But like I said, ensuring that the good is maximized and the bad is minimized can only be done if we have good governance institutions to govern these technologies. And maybe the last thing I'll say is an exhortation to my fellow technologists out there, which is long gone are those days when one could say, oh, that I'm only building technology, it's not for me to decide how it's going to be used or what its impacts are. No, we are well past that BS now. We are all responsible for the consequences of our creations, and so as technologists, we cannot wash our hands off the consequences of the technologies we create. Thank you.
On to Professor Deepak. Can you go, sir?
Deepak, can we hear from you?
Hi, on to Professor Deepak. Can we?
Yeah, okay. So, thanks very much. And it's fantastic to be here. And I must say this front that when I've been in some of these some of these kinds of conversations which involve academics and policymakers, and sometimes with journalists, but trade unionist presence is something that has been unique to this forum, and I think that's fantastic, and especially at this point where we have reached where corporate AI is elephant in the room, right? I mean that's the issue that we're discussing. All of that. So one thing that I would like to mention, I would like to start is. Talking about how technology has been has been predominantly treated by corporate power. In the sense, whenever you talk about AI summits, there are national level AI efforts in India. There was a recent summit in UK. I mean, it's all dominated by businessmen. There are very few academics, no trade unionists whatsoever. I mean, nothing of. It's largely corporate. So you can see the corporate power being at the. So essentially, AI is being developed in order to further corporate interests. So it's always being used in order to enhance the profits. And when you talk about Uber and when you talk about all sorts of other things, for example, Google and so on, all of them are data companies and AI companies, and they have tremendous profits, and they can be only matched by the likes of the oil companies, right? I mean, in the sense who are naturally extracting from the environment. So essentially, it's that kind of power that we're up against. So it's not an easy game to start with. And when you talk about data collection, right? I think Salahuddin mentioned a little about some of the ride-hailing services and so on. I would like to understand it better because I'm not very good with understanding Hindi, but I look forward to reading his chapter. So there's a model that we use which is about data collection over the masses and centralized management by corporates, right? In order to further their interests. And when you talk about drivers, they were asked for their data, and they might get their data. Let's say that all 10,000 drivers who are employed by a particular company get their individual data in their hands. But that doesn't solve anything, because the intelligence is by bringing together, is the coming together of this data, and that coming together happens only within that centralized management process. And that is controlled by the corporate platform, and that is not just controlled in the sense of just being controlled in order to do some operations, but is controlled in order to enhance profits. For example, like Salahuddin also mentioned, I think there are these incentive structures that are driven in order to get you to do. I mean, there's this autonomy paradox and so on that people talk about. Freelancers are not really freelancers. They're really nudged by these incentive structures and so on. And some of the nicer things that have been happening, or at least perceived to be nice, that have been happening in the AI space has been about AI ethics and AI fairness. There has been a growing area. There have been plenty of conferences now talking about these kinds of things, and plenty of publications and so on. So most of their focus is a particularly Western focus, I would say, that is looking at race and gender as the particular aspects where you look at. So you have this AI, and this AI is giving disparate outcomes for males and females, or disparate outcomes for whites and blacks. What do we do about it? And many of these things try to put a veneer of fairness by saying that you do whatever the process, you don't disturb the processing as much, and then in terms of the outcomes when it comes out, you ensure that there is 50% representation of women, there is whatever representation of this thing and so on. So you're never going back and looking at what is it that is creating this problem. Why is it not fair by default? So you need to go back to that question and see what is the thing in the AI system that is creating this unfairness. You can put this constraint-driven veneer and so on. That's fine. You can but that only allows the underlying process, which is fundamentally problematic, to carry on without much issues. And data justice is a full system problem of AI. It's not, many a time we talk about data procurement, data pre-processing, etc. But it's not just that. You can amplify biases along the pipeline. We talk about things as pipelines. When you start from the data collection, data curation, data pre-processing, then data modeling, then evaluation. It could happen all along the pipeline, and it's a complicated thing. It needs to be viewed as a totality, in the sense that the data procurement issues could get amplified in the data modeling. It could get even more amplified in the evaluation phase, or it's a complicated interplay of things. And when we talk about AI, we often say that it's all in the data and so on, which kind of exonerates all the algorithm design issues, which is very problematic. And so essentially the point is that we need to reimagine AI as empowerment of the masses. For example, when you're talking about AI usage in labor, we're talking about empowerment of workers and not about enslavement of workers. And I think to a large extent AI is working as an enslavement technology, which kind of monitors every action of workers and kind of not just in particular ways and to the interest of corporate profits. And one last thing that I would like to talk about is we recently did some work on analyzing the AI influence in elections and so on. And there's plenty of AI being used behind the scenes in order to do voter list maintenance and voter list curation and stuff like that. So what we discovered was that many a time the AI ethos is a data first ethos. You start from the data that is available. I think the first speaker also touched upon some of these things. You start from the data that is available, and then look at whether there are issues there. So in voter list maintenance, there is this trade-off between integrity and access. It is to say that there should be integrity in the sense that you should not have wrong people in the voters list. So if you use a data first approach, looking at what is the voters list currently and weeding out the wrong voters, the voters who should not be there, and that is one way of looking at it, which is predominantly used in AI focused approaches. But there is also a data seeking approach which is required in the sense it's also about access. It could be that the data collection processes that lead to these voters lists are fundamentally exclusionary, fundamentally discriminatory, in the sense that it doesn't go to certain areas where certain kinds of demographics live and so on. So we need to have a data-seeking approach in order to balance this access and integrity trade-off. And AI is fundamentally incapable of doing that data-seeking approach because it starts with the data that is already there, and that's the way it works. So I think I'll stop there. And once again, happy to be very glad to be involved in these conversations and this part of work.
Thank you so much.
Can you unmute first? Yeah.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sundar. Sonia, would you like to add something to the discussion? We've covered most of the authors. If you have some responses,
I can comment with the discussants altogether.
Yeah.
I think that's better, probably, right?
Yeah.
You have so much. Is that okay?
Yeah, we're starting with all the authors.
They all spoken? Okay. So we're starting with the discussants. Okay, good. So first of all, I just wanted to say thank you all, and thank you for all the authors. From my perspective, you are the ones that are really bringing the richness of the analysis and the thinking. And I looked at it, I actually read it until 2 o'clock in the morning, much of what you wrote in these chapters. And what I want to say is that I was incredibly, not just impressed, but really also challenged in a good way. I thought all the discussions that you're having, the issues that you're raising in these articles are so important and so rich, and I don't see this discussion anywhere. So I wanted to highlight to all of you that everything that you are raising is not only critical, important, this is exactly what we need to be talking about, but you have started a discussion in a way that is quite unique because of all the perspectives that you brought in, because of all the different kinds of backgrounds that you bring to this data justice issue. So I want to first start by just saying congratulations on bringing all of these different voices to this one book and bringing them together. The reason why I say it was also a challenge is because I think you mentioned these, and you as well, at the beginning of your interventions. These are not easy conversations. We are all kind of, it's almost like we are part of this very large experiment that we are all shaping and building, right? And I think that these chapters that you've written show exactly that, how we can take ownership of how we want, this whole dialogue and on data justice, how laws, policies, practice can actually evolve. And so I don't actually have a whole lot to add. What I want to just highlight is that what you are doing and the thinking that you are putting into these, and frankly, the incredible depth of the questions that you asked, that you also shared this morning, it's tremendous. And I think you are going to be a model that many people around the world can learn from, because we need to be asking these questions everywhere. You talked about South Africa, of course, India. There's many other countries that are really struggling with so many of these questions. And you here, I think, are much farther ahead because you're having these conversations already and questioning each other, challenging each other from a legal perspective, from a technical perspective, from a justice perspective, identity perspective. To me, it was so rich. I feel like truly overwhelmed in a good way by reading so much of what you've written. And I think that we just need to create more of these spaces, Osama. In fact, I hope that you can continue this conversation, and Jenny and your colleague, in the next months, and maybe actually bring some of your peers from other countries, from other regions, to the table so that we can start creating some of these, almost like co-creating how we want some of these things to be addressed. Not just in India, which is great that you're already thinking about, but also elsewhere. So I really just want to congratulate you for this incredible book and discussion. And to say I've learned so much from you, from reading it. I couldn't stop. That's why it was 2 o'clock in the morning and I was still going. So yeah, just keep the conversation. I'll just leave it as that. You saying what needs to be said. So thank you.
I know that Nikhil and Rakshita, they have to step out. In just continuing the conversation, I am very just moving away from this, and since I move around a lot among the technology solution provider and the government claiming, and also while we are discussing questioning our own system, we are exporting them now. We are saying, and not only exporting, I have met the state government of at least 10 countries who are boasting that you guys are so much far ahead and we are taking your Aadhaar and we want to take your UPI, we want to take this, how do we take it forward? And all these countries are certainly smaller countries and developing countries, but they are looking up to you. I was in IGF in Japan, and people are like talking to them, oh my God, you guys are on this here. And here we are discussing in the room, not again and not once, but again and again, that how Aadhaar is a stack which is only collecting data and trying to link data and actually excluding more and more people. And here is South Africa and or
the
whole world is saying that how soon can we take it and how soon. So so I am asking at three of you, Srinivas and Rakshita and Nikhil, is that do you think, is there anything good that Aadhaar has done which earlier was not done?
So I mean, since it's
a very basic question.
Very basic question.
Yeah.
So Srinivas said that there are good things in Aadhaar as well.
No, I'm talking from the masses perspective.
I would say one single thing that Aadhaar has consistently lied about and which is made it a disaster, and therefore something that has become an adversary for many people and many programs, is that it made it mandatory. If it was something that really offered advantage, people go to what offers the advantage. But it was made and is not just mandatory, it's mandatory plus. So as a basic question and a basic answer, a technology dictatorship that Aadhaar is allows itself to be everything that centralized systems do plus much more, and a disaster for many of the things that Aadhaar wants to do. But since it becomes the experiment of a dictator, you reach great disasters as well. And I shudder to think of what will happen to those countries who do it in the same framework.
I also want to add to that one responses. I do see the possibilities. So, for example, when, for instance, many of these states have these family 360-degree databases which existed, we've been unhappy about it. But the one thing those databases can do, if you are tracking who is born, who died, what is their caste status, what is their age status, then the one thing you immediately know are these are 8 lakh people who should be given pension. Why is the state waiting for these 8 lakh people to apply? Use that system and database that you've created for proactive reach out. But the one thing that I want to also say is that if a system works for 80% of the people, that's nothing to congratulate oneself with. Those 80% would have worked on any paradigm, any framework. If it is not working for those that we're calling excluded, we're making it sound like it's a very tiny, minuscule percentage. There are lots of people. If it's not working for them, then what is the point of introducing it? I mean, we have not evolved then into a different, more progressive paradigm. If we keep congratulating ourselves that majority got on it, up now we're dealing with the minority, then we are exactly where we were, because that majority would have gotten onto any system you would have created. So at that public cost that you spent, you have actually gone nowhere. We are just where we were. So it's also to hold them accountable for even that benchmark for that question.
But I want to say one line, it's a very useful management tool. There is no doubt. So it's the good, if I'm a manager, yeah, I'll say great.
Yes, you want to chairperson? I will come to you.
Small edit. When unorganized workers e-shram data will be started, now you can tag in from the Aadhaar updated mobile number. That time multiple, you can see unorganized workers not tie up with e-shram card because multiple factor that time. Some you time ask from OTP, no one can generate OTP that time. You know, that's where the failure of the Aadhaar card to tie up with e-shram card. That is the one type of, you can see now also multiple, you can go from villages or some remote control areas, unorganized workers will be there. But no, today is also joined from e-shram card. But government of India is tell multiple times, या हमने कर दिया e-shram card, unorganized workers के लिए खाता खोल दिया, एक दुकान खोल दिया, हम सब database बना रहे. वही अभी बहुत सारे हैं, उनका क्या होगा? अगर जब आप इसको ही ये डाटा को लेके अगर जब आप गवर्नमेंट स्कीम्स बना रहे, कुछ बनाना चाह रहे, तो जो बच गए उनका क्या होगा? जो आज तक मोबाइल नंबर से आधार से जोड़ नहीं पाए, उनका तो कहीं पे भी वो नहीं है.
I've been looking at the Aadhaar program in Telangana primarily. Like we've been the state, if you're saying exporting, right? We've been the state which exported it to India first. And if you look at what was the Aadhaar program before it was called the Aadhaar program, it was called the AP Smart Card project in 2006 when there were experiments in Andhra Pradesh where they built, where they experimented EBT, electronic banking transfers, where the RBI was looking at how do we use biometrics to do banking transfers. All of this before Mr. Nilekani comes up with this idea of Aadhaar, okay? This is a state exercise, it has nothing to do with these actors. And it is not something that has been developed in India. It has been something that has been imported. Now we are saying we are exporting it, right, from India. It has been actually imported into India from Europe, from a country, Estonia. I don't know, a lot of people have looked into this. But AP, Hyderabad and Estonia have this whole historic connection all the way back to Y2K, where these are two regions where the World Bank was helping digitize, and you see a lot of models that were exported within Estonia, Hyderabad and Singapore, right? So in that sense, in fact, the Telangana government after the formation of Telangana said Aadhaar doesn't work, we don't need it. So we created our own facial recognition digital identity. Telangana is the only state in India which has its own digital identity. And it has an ID for each of us which it doesn't disclose to us. Okay, so it tracks each of us, it doesn't disclose to us. Okay, it's a Telangana state ID.
Because you know about yourself.
Anyway, so from an ID lens, has Aadhaar done anything good? Aadhaar was an experimentation program on the welfare to help India digitize. It had nothing to do with governance, it had nothing to do with welfare, it has nothing to do with voting, it has nothing to do with deduplication. We have been conned.
Last.
Okay, yeah, that's, thank you for those.
Gone for what?
Conned to let the market, the private actors who want to digitize India to make money. But in this process, when you created this language of duplicates, frauds who don't have Aadhaar, you suddenly made the state go after people looking for frauds. There were none. So you deleted people, actual people from databases, from voting databases. 2018 elections in Telangana, we could not vote because of this exercise. From welfare databases, anybody who has a car, who's a car driver, cannot get a ration. Right? The state was put on a witch hunt, and this went on towards citizenship, NRC. Right? It is the language of this, what we've been told was always a lie. So if you ask me, has anything done good? You made money. Who made money? We know who made money. And they're exporting it to a different country with the same language of fraud, duplicates, with the same language of empowerment, none of which happened in India.
So it's been data injustice.
Yes.
My Aadhaar and tweeted about it very proudly that I've done it and you should also do it. In 2012, I think this was 5 years of Aadhaar, and we all went to Nandurbar, the Prime Minister, Sonia Gandhi and all that, and we got the first person who got the Aadhaar card in Nandurbar with a big fee. I'll be very short on this. And Mr. Nilekani was by that time heading this. And he was on stage with all of us. I don't know whether you have Chatham House rules, because what I'm going to say is not good.
It is being broadcasted, don't worry.
Okay.
You don't have a Chatham House rule because it's being broadcasted.
That's what I'm saying, we are being broadcast.
So I can say things which is that Mr. Nilekani used to come and each week used to present data about DBT and Aadhaar and LPG distribution. Okay, and he used to drop in my office every week, and we used to be very happy about it. Now, making it mandatory, okay, that's where the crux was. I would also like to tell you that Mr. Nilekani was one of the first people who went and met Mr. Narendra Modi after the regime was changed. 2014. And he has gone there basically to continue. I'm sure that must have come up in the discussion, to continue to be the back office of our taxation system. Okay, and I can say it as a journalist that this was a quid pro quo, that the Aadhaar was made mandatory, and
but by law it is still not mandatory.
By law, that's the whole thing. The beauty about this is that there is nothing on record that you have to link your Aadhaar with your bank card. There's nothing on record. and there's nothing on record saying you have to link your Aadhaar to your voter ID card.
Yeah.
I get a call from the voter ID people that have you linked your Aadhaar with this thing? I say I don't want to because it's voluntary. So this is how the political economy of Aadhaar has been working. What you are saying is right. I think going forward, what we should do with all the deliberations you are having, that we should make a do's and don'ts about Aadhaar for other countries.
I was just going to tell you.
I'm not joking.
This is why I thought it was so fascinating.
Yes.
To
So
read.
what he is saying that it should be a voluntary thing, and voluntary meaning that people who are in the need, it's a supply and demand thing. If you want a gas cylinder, people who are not using gas cylinder don't need Aadhaar. Okay, if you are not getting any benefit from the government and you don't want it, you don't need it. The whole idea was basically that direct benefit should be linked to Aadhaar so people know, and whoever volunteers to do that should do that. I don't have a ration card. I don't need a ration card. I don't have that LPG cylinder subsidy thing because I don't need it. I don't have a Jan Dhan account. So the people who don't need it, to do that, and it's the responsibility of the government to reach out to the people in far-flung areas and who have no means, to give them Aadhaar and all the benefits and link it by all means. My basic thing was that in DBT there was leakages. I say if you go to any big company, Walmart sets aside 3-4% of its revenue for leakages. Walmart is a multi-trillion-dollar company, and you can imagine the kind of money which they are saying this will be leaked away. The government's job is not to look at every paisa and every pie. There will be leakages in the system. So when the private sector is saying there are leakages, the government should make it in the system that it will be leaked. And you cannot have 100% leak-proof DBT anywhere in the world. It's not happening. So that's what we have to keep in mind. And also the political economy of this now it's going to be sold for billions of dollars to other countries. And you should make a book like this, the do's and don'ts of Aadhaar.
Yes, that is very much is required.
Just so that there is no misunderstanding, I want to make it clear that I am saying that you cannot bring Aadhaar between me and my Narega work.
Yeah.
If I want Narega, I should not want to have Aadhaar. I may want to if it's helping me. But I should get Narega regardless of Aadhaar, I should get ration regardless of Aadhaar, I should get voting regardless of Aadhaar. It cannot be made mandatory to get any right of mine. If I feel like, voluntary is if I feel like and I see it gives me some help, produce something that will give me some help. But I should have unhindered access to my right. Don't bring Aadhaar into
Yeah. Right should not be accessed through Aadhaar. Okay, I'll limit. It's okay, time is up. Europe, like Estonia, right? I keep thinking, what did Estonia do? Did we have the same issues that AP has, India has? Does Estonia has the same issue? They don't because they are a country with the human rights framework within Europe and a certain level of systems in place, okay, to ensure that this kind of state violence doesn't take place. Yeah. Okay. I should recognize that Sonia Nikita wanted to say something, but I also want to recognize Kavita is there. She was part of the discussion. She is very politely and quietly.
Minor point, that is sorry before. Yes, because there is the other session that is starting at 12.
Go on.
Please, all of you do come.
Yes,
for
some of you also have the session.
Yes, I join. Let's go.
I think it's okay.
Yes.
So I have a very minor point, which is that there is this huge narrative control that is built up the idea of Aadhaar being, not just Aadhaar, but our entire digital public infrastructure being this fantastic success that is worth exporting. And all the discussions that we are having here somehow do not make it into that narrative control, those stories that are being told outside of India. And I feel that somewhere we have failed in being able to raise the level of our voices loud enough, and I think that everything that we are saying here needs to be amplified much more, because that narrative control is really quite complete.
Sonia, quickly, please.
I was actually just going to follow up on what you said, is that IDs are important. I just want to note, it's important to have IDs, it's important for people to be identified. It's a basic infrastructure of running a country, a government. I think the question here is that as IDs have become digitized, how do you make sure that all of the information, all the data, and that digitalization does not in any way violate your right to have an ID, to be identified as a citizen and act as a citizen without any kind of those issues that you are all concerned, that you've raised in all of these articles. I think that's the difference, because when you go to Europe, as you said, I mean, I have a digital ID from my, because I'm also Portuguese, I carry a Portuguese passport, and I feel very comfortable with that digital ID, because I know that there is a very strong data protection law in Europe that I don't have to worry about. And the fact that I have that digital ID gives me extreme power, flexibility, and that's the kind of thing, like can the discussion be in such a way, and this is what I thought was really good here, you raising all these incredible questions because of your experience of how it was implemented. That's what needs to be heard. That's what needs to be known, so that many other countries are looking at Aadhaar and replicating, and they are selling the whole model.
Yes.
And it's a great project in many ways. But how can you make it greater, so in a way that it will not create these violations and abuses and these demands that you are talking about? I think that's where this discussion needs to be more public, and you can bring others to it, so that as they implement something similar or the same, they do it better and it continues to evolve, because it is important to have anyway. So.
No, I just very quickly wanted to sort of highlight the contrast of the kind of dependence that has been built on Aadhaar, to say Aadhaar is required to access all kinds of entitlement. If one were to contrast that, in cases of when one is trying to exercise their right to liberty, so for instance, as lawyers, when we go to court and when somebody's been granted bail and you have to produce an ID because people have no other kind of ID, and Aadhaar is sort of the only ID now that people have, it is not considered to be a valid ID, right? If a child has been picked up by the police and is being tortured in custody and you're required to prove this child's age, people only have Aadhaar, but it's not considered to be a valid ID by the court. So it's also very interesting how when it comes to mandatory, but there will be it's selective, right? Like where is it that the state thinks this is an ID that is a non-negotiable, and where is it when you want to incarcerate people, when you want to criminalize them? So it's the crux of
now
the surveillance architecture. But
your date of birth is the only going to be the valid point for something.
Yeah.
So why this new drama? Because my date of birth is written in Aadhaar. Why not Aadhaar?
But it's not valid.
That's what I'm saying.
It's not considered to be valid.
An ID that is
okay, great. Thank you very much. I think it was very enriching. I think I'm feeling like that conversation 2.0 on
You want to go across? I'm Habib, the data firm.
I'm Afra, I work with Point of View. I'm Monica, I'm from University of Hyderabad. I'm Amsha from Indian News. We are working on a digital advocacy project. Hi, Shubhati, I'm Sandhana. I'm working with Nikita, the Organization Criminal Justice and Police Accountability.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm Shafali. I work with Ashoka's law for our teams. We're co-hosting this session.
You also both come here and sit and introduce yourself. They're from Swati's organization.
Oh.
Yeah. No, Smita, sorry. Smita.
Yeah.
Smita's organization.
Hello, so I'm Ankita. I'm working with PAR, Prison Media Action Research. I'm Mohana. I'm also from Prison Media Action Research.
So, Bashish, you know Prison International Research, right? Smita's organization.
Yeah, of course. Well, thank you so much for introducing and thank you also for joining us. I think what we wanted to discuss is three distinct things. But before that, maybe I'll very quickly share about the work that we do at Ashoka and Law for All initiative. Ashoka was established in the 1980s to catalyze the work that the social entrepreneurs around the world have been doing. In the last 40-45 years, we have elected more than 3,800 fellows in 94 countries, including more than 500 in India. And the Law for All initiative works primarily with the social entrepreneurs that are furthering access to justice through their work. And Nikita, Osama, and Smita, they are all Ashoka fellows. Osama is a senior Ashoka fellow. And for this conversation today, we thought we wanted to discuss about the use of digital tools in the work of social entrepreneurs that are working towards furthering access to justice. And there are three areas that I thought might be more relevant for this discussion. One is what are the different strategies that community leaders and social entrepreneurs use that make primarily use of digital tools. The second is what are the strategies that community leaders and social entrepreneurs use when their digital technology fails, it doesn't work for some reason, maybe it's lack of access, maybe because of other issues. And the third is digital tools are used by actors that are other than communities. It could be state, it could be civil society actors, but any actor that is not the community itself. And the digital tools that are used that don't necessarily benefit the community, but put the community in any kind of danger. So I think all those, in all those cases, we see different strategies that are used, different social innovations that are created, and we really want to focus on the social innovations by community leaders and organizations that are working closely with communities. Sometimes organizations are created by communities, so they have members from the communities themselves, and sometimes there are allies and external actors, external individuals which are from outside the community. So I think we see all of these things. So let's start probably with Osama, your work as it's spanning across the country, and for the last 20 years, DF has been working together with many communities. So maybe share a little bit about the strategies that either use digital technology, digital tools for furthering access to justice?
Yeah.
Prasanna, over to you.
Okay, so it's very interesting because Subhashish, you were not there in the previous session, and those of you were there, and all of them. It's looking like an extension of the previous discussion that we were talking. We were discussing about the book that we just released with the chapter discussing the conversation about digital data justice and all that. Rather than talking more as a fellow, I would like to take the conversation forward, and I'm just thinking that since Law for All as a division in Ashoka and the entire area in Ashoka where we are, several of them we are there already in this area, who directly work for justice, who indirectly work for justice. People like us who are more on the ground, at a larger scale, where we are, we don't even know that we are working for justice, but actually that is what we are working for, because most of the people who are not getting their entitlements, most of the people who are not getting daily requirement, is subject to harassment, subject to processes, subject to gatekeeping, subject to authenticating, is actually injustice. I mean, what is my right is actually beyond several milestones, several checkposts, several barriers, several speed breakers and all that. Is actually a harassment. If I want 5 kg of ration and is spending 5 days in getting them, or need so many papers to get them, it is actually injustice. And from that perspective, what we have not done, which we think that we should do, and I'm proposing while I'm discussing this, is that is there a possibility that under Law for All at Ashoka and all of us with the fellows get together and we try to do the do's and don'ts of reaching the justices, and what are the story? For example, we, Government of India, corporates and everybody says that, let's say photocopy is not available in villages, let's say, and it is necessary, right? But and because of that, people have to travel so much. But we do not say that a photocopy costs to a poor person 250 rupees and we pay 1 rupee. Okay, we do not say that getting a ration costs more than the cost of ration, right? We do not say that getting your school education even free of cost actually costs so much, and it has so many barriers and all that. We take it in a positive inclusion process. We say, okay, it requires 5 identity card, we have only 4. I am going 2 days for last 2 days I'm going the 5th identity card, so to get it. And it is all very very normal. If you go to a village and you say that your roads are not working, most of the people will say it's coming up, in next 3 months it will be up. And if you ask more questions, they will say for the last 5 years. But they are very hopefully saying that it will be ready in the next 3 months. We are going to have a highway and we'll have all this. So it's a very, I would say it's a very patient way of explaining your torture. It's a very hopeful way of explaining your torture and your injustices. So it is not even treated as injustice. If it is not even seen as injustice. One more example, big example that I would say is that we have started making things digital as a necessity. For example, you have to upload your photograph or something to get something. Like Narega requires you to upload your photograph and your attendance online to get you the wages. Now this is a digital. Earlier also they used to mark attendance, but it was physical. Wherever you are, they will mark on the register or whatever, or put a biometric authentication or something. But now you have to upload. That means you need so many things and all that. Now all this costs a lot. and there is no public access point also to do all this. So, how do we actually documentize in such a way that we sound that how costly it is to access to entitlement, how costly it is or how horrendous it is or how torturous it is to wait. I mean, for example, in the village, if somebody is not having internet connection, not having computers, not having mobile, I mean, and you say do your classwork and homework online, and then you publish in newspaper this girl in a very appreciative manner that this girl in Kerala goes every day to the top of the hill and submits her classwork, and wow, our people are so resilient and so brave and this and that. I mean, she is clearly saying that what was supposed to be available at home, for which I have to walk 15 kilometers or 20 kilometers to submit my classwork or homework, is a torture. It's not an appreciation. What is this?
There's something that has appeared on
Is it being hacked?
No, I think you accidentally tried to stop the recording or something. Okay. So that is showing where you can say the recording.
Are we supposed to record or not supposed to record?
Are we supposed to record, Subhashish?
I mean, if
yes,
you're comfortable, you can record.
Sure, yes.
Record, you should record.
Record to the cloud?
Yeah.
Whose cloud?
I don't know whose computer.
So just
it is our community, yes.
Okay.
No, do it on the computer.
Computer, then be easier to get.
Recording in progress.
Okay, good.
Yeah. Great.
So yeah, I will stop there. But basically, trying to say is that while we are, approach, how do we approach anything that is happening in our society and community into the category of injustice and document it in such a way and convert it into economic value. For example, you must be seeing that internet shutdown earlier was a normal news, but now people like us, we have started talking about the economic value of the internet shutdown, emotional value of internet shutdown, or how much are we losing out on economy if it is shut down or something like that. So that way your impact will be much higher, our impact will be much higher if we change the conversation in such a way that we talk about injustices in an economic sense, in an emotional sense, in a value sense, and in a manner that it hits hard to the people who are actually subjecting us to injustices. Yeah, I'll stop there.
Thanks, Samatosan. That was really useful, particularly centering the question around how difficult it is for people to access justice, and you rightly pointed out that it sometimes is not even considered as access because it's very normalized. The pain is very normalized. I think that's really important. And I think that's very pertinent into your work as well, Nikita.
Yeah.
As you're working with many communities, particularly the denotified communities in NP, and I think yeah, it also is very useful if you could also provide a little bit of background about your work and how digital tools are used in general, and if they're used at all as catalyst, or if they become a hindrance, and when they become a hindrance, what are the other digital tools that might be used to mitigate such risks, if that exists in your context, because you're also working with communities that live in cities, but there are also communities that live far away from cities without, say, internet connectivity or without any phone connectivity. So I think, yeah, so we're looking at a really large spectrum in terms of access, and yeah, you could elaborate a little bit on that.
So I want to sort of push further from that conversation around access to justice to basically speak about how there are communities who are not within anybody's imagination of the framework of justice, right? For whom sort of all tenets of what is considered to be justice is, turned on top of its head. So, I mean, I was also saying this in the earlier session, that these are communities, scores of communities deemed as criminals by birth, right? So there is a presumption of guilt, there is no presumption of innocence. As they say, that you presume somebody is innocent until it's proven that they're guilty. There is a sort of irreversible presumption of guilt that already exists, right? So there is no like sort of process of tariq pe tariq or anything, because you are very fundamentally, your existence is seen to be as lying outside of that framework, and this is the kind of framework that scores of communities who earlier were deemed as whether criminal tribes or thuggees, and now as within this really nebulous category of habitual offenders that we understand in different ways are existing, and it's a category that's only expanding. Acquiring different forms now, particularly in the last decade, has acquired a very sort of prominent sort of religious framing, which is through the othering of Muslims, but has largely included oppressed caste communities, right? So I think for us, what we're seeing now with the advent of digital technology, or the sort of madness and this kind of never-ending exercise to accumulate data, for us it's part of this ongoing process of historical injustice that we're now seeing being digitally replicated, right? And I think for us and for communities that we work with, so many of us who are also part of these communities, the goal is to basically think about how do you now turn this exercise on its head. So at CPA, when we began doing work on policing, in the development space, there is the first sort of question that anybody asks you is, which is the community that you work with, right? So name your community. So the community that we work with, or in so many ways work against, is the police. A great place to be saying this at. We work on questions of, speaking about how this is an institution, and the way that I'm trained as a lawyer and a researcher. I don't work directly on questions of technology, but in many ways still engage with it, as does everybody else. But I do it through the question of casteist policing, right? So as you would say, we speak about the framework, we speak about the design of policing, and we say that it was meant to be a discriminatory framework that is now being put within a sort of digital box, right? And so we're seeing this kind of use of AI, use of facial recognition, using data to identify and mark criminal hotspots. We are saying that the police has always done this. This is not new. This is not news for them, right? Like they know agar chori hua hai, there is a Muslim basti in your jurisdiction, you are going to go there. So there is no element of prediction. It's also just now we've tried to make it seem more sophisticated by saying there is data that has been collected, and now there is technology that is going to tell us that this is the place where crime is going to happen. When if you look at that police station's records historically, that's the only place where they've made arrests and nowhere else, right? So what we are doing is we are pushing back against that and say, well, look, you've collected data on us. Now we are going to collect data on you and try to make meaning of what does this data tell us about the institution of policing. So what is the crux of what we are doing is using technology to sort of cull out data that the police generates on a day-to-day basis, which is in terms of FIRs that they file against people, the arrests that they make, and then mining that data and disaggregating it to understand who they are arresting, right? So naming who they are arresting and what they are arresting them for and how are they doing it. So there is this sort of really common perception, which has obviously been bolstered by pop culture, which is to say, there's this really larger than life kind of police character going after the big bad guys. When in reality, when we look at this disaggregated data, it tells us that it's the police is actually arresting people who are playing cards on the road, in their mohalla. Or like somebody during the lockdown, somebody who stepped out to buy vegetables, or somebody who was selling vegetables, which was an essential service. So this idea, and of course these are all people who, like, you know, they were not arresting people at the South Delhi Diwali card parties, right? They were arresting people from marginalized communities who are gambling for leisure. So this idea of, you know, how so much of policing is basically very like tied to the criminalization of certain forms of being. You know, it's just that there are certain people who have to exist for the police to say that this is the wrong way to exist and therefore we are going to put you in prison. So we are using then data and digital data with communities to sort of create this counter data on the institution that has created data to criminalize us for so long. So I think the idea is that we are not speaking to the access of justice, but we are actually speaking to and creating and generating evidence on a framework which has been designed to exclude us from any kind of conception of justice to begin with, and say that there is actually a need for an imagination of an alternative idea of justice which is different from this framework that has been designed to oppress us. So I think that is the way in which we see, and I think this is the kind of critical, you know, thinking and leadership around data, which is what communities have been doing, right? And as we proceed with this conversation, we will speak to it how, you know, in cases of custodial violence or, you know, custodial deaths, when somebody has been falsely implicated, this is the kind of critical engagement with technology that people have been pushing back against, to be able to create avenues of justice for themselves that lie outside of this formal legal framework.
Thanks so much, Nikita. That's something that I'm going to actually ask a little bit later in a second question. But I think that's also what you just mentioned about how communities have been gathering evidence and creating, using digital tools to create evidence about the abuse of digital tools, right? So that's a really powerful way to frame it. And I think my second question is exactly about that. When communities see that the technology is not working for them but against them and is being used to exclude them further. And this is a question to you, Osama, and then to you, Nikita, after that. How communities have been building resilience for many, many years when technology didn't exist, or technology exists elsewhere but doesn't exist or doesn't work for them. I mean, it could be communities that have built mesh networks, or it could be communities that are sort of building very localized social entrepreneurial models. And I think you have tons of examples of people that have sort of been forced to stay outside the, say, fast internet and access to data and access to other privileges through access to digital technology. And what kind of new and innovative models that they have built to make sure that they still are able to exercise their own rights. Osama.
So, you know, one thing we always fail is that in recognizing that, like you also use the sentence that is technology failing them, or is technology not reaching them or something. Actually, it's not technology. It is the administration. It is the policy. It is the decision behind that. So if for example, if my economy was running by making product where my communication system and the market system was such that I was making a product and then communicating word of mouth, or communicating with word of hoarding, or communicating with word of whatever. I mean, existing let's say pre-digital era or pre-technology era, if you're doing, or going to the market to sell the products. So my intelligence was based on the communication system which was earlier, and then suddenly what happens is that I create a new communication system and we say that now you have to follow this communication system. Now there are two things to do this. One is that you create a new communication system, you say it's an additional economic benefit, or it's an alternative economic benefit, or it's an alternative medium to do this. And then there is a system that you say that, okay, this is the new way of doing only things. You know, it's something like you say that I can go to the market and then choose my product and buy and come back. There is another one, you say that there is no other way to do except Amazon or Blinkit or something else. And going in person is actually an alternative, but not the preference. It's something like using the lift, you know, to coming to this floor. Now we have created a situation, even going one floor, we created a situation of, you know, using the technology for going one floor and not the earlier technology which was the stairs, you know.
It's more convenient.
No, so what I'm saying, it is actually not convenient.
The stairs are not.
Of course the stairs is convenient.
But the lift is not convenient.
Lift is not convenient.
But yet we choose
It's costlier also, but you call because we created this new convenience as a culture, you know, cultural shift. So, but what I'm saying, forget about that. I'm saying, you know, in most of the building when you want to walk, the security guard will not allow you to go to the stairs.
Yeah.
You know, they will tell that only lift is go because we don't have a security system in that area to look how you are going, or you are going to install some bomb or whatever, I don't even know. I mean, it's something like, we have created a system of changing the culture to adopting a new technology, you know, and then making it mandatory and make it exclusionary if you don't do it. So there is a process. All this has nothing to do with technology. All this is cultural practice or administrative decision or something like that, right? When you enter into a building, the security guard says, please enter here. You know, he has no idea that you know, whether it is required or not required, and then suddenly one day you go, now you do the entry and also show the Aadhaar card. The third time when you go, you say, do the entry, give the Aadhaar card, and then he will say, now put the machine on in front of you, put this Aadhaar card into that machine. That will happen when you go to Google office. Oh no, when they will check you and then they will ask you to enter, because then they are taking your data in a electronic format, because it's too much of data entry from the register, right? So what I am actually trying to say is that we actually in the process of adopting a new communication system or a new technology or something, we do not blame the person who is asking rather than, and we start blaming the technology, you know, which is a very easy way not to blame the person who is actually telling you to do this, you know. And therefore again you are subjecting yourself to injustice, to the invisible, you know, and not even target that person. We are blaming Aadhaar. Who is asking us to do Aadhaar? We should go to them and say that, you know, this new system is not acceptable or something, you know. But we are all going to have Aadhaar. Even the person who is blaming Aadhaar is also having Aadhaar. So yeah, I mean, I'm just trying to say, at a community, the reason I said this is that at a community level, we actually create a culture of adopting new things as a healer or as something that is best, as something. I mean, for example, when we do digital literacy, they themselves ask, can I open a Facebook account? You know, the first thing, I mean, they have nothing to do with Facebook. I mean, Facebook is for those who have to interact with a friend who will also be on Facebook, right? They have no friends on Facebook. Or for that matter, I am living in such an area where I have no friends. I don't even know whether my friends are there on the Facebook. I want a Facebook. Yeah, because it's a new technology, new communication system which is being created in such a way that I want to be there. You know? And then you make it mandatory and all that.
And I think the two things that really are very important here. One is the power structure that is behind technology and how it percolates through technology. Existing power structures that have been there in the society for so many years, be it caste-based, be it gender-based, be it disability-based. All these power structures that already exist in our society use technology as a vehicle to move forward. and people are actually responsible. People that have enjoyed generational privileges have always used these power structures to ensure that the technology works for them. And not for the community. And often, as you rightly said, a lot of these power exercises happen with the pretext of that there's a digital revolution, there's a new digital tool, and let's use this tool so that we can solve X, Y, Z problem. The second thing that I think is very important here to recognize is that technology is not a panacea or antidote to all the existing problems. Nikita, to you, my question would be, how do you see this existing resilient innovations that exist in our society, in our communities, that now are trying to address problems created by technology?
Sorry, just so that I understand your question correctly, you're asking me about practices that exist within communities that are relied on, when technology is failing or when technology is creating troubles for people. Have I got that right, Subhashish?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm asking. It doesn't have to be technology-based solutions, but it has to be a solution that is to fight challenges that are either created by technology or created without in the absence of technology.
So I think I can speak to the context in which I have sort of engaged with these questions the most. I think there has been this sort of facade of safety that has been created with technology, right? One is of course what Osama was also referring to earlier, is speaking to accessibility, that अच्छा आप lift ले लेंगे. Of course, it's a different story कि आप lift लेंगे, that your domestic workers are only then mandated to take the stairs. No, they are not allowed to take lifts. So it's just been sold as this thing of making lives easier, obviously for a certain strata of society, under the banner of saying access for all. But that all is obviously a very, very minuscule section of the population to make lives easier for them, right? So this whole idea of surveillance technology has come into place to say, let's make ourselves and make our communities safer, which is basically to say, if you're living in a gated community, install all the CCTV cameras that you can and surveil, your domestic workers, the people that come to collect garbage, basically people without whom your lives will not function, but people you must watch. So we want them to do their job, but we want them to do it in a way that doesn't bother us, because ultimately we think they are a problem to us, right? So we need to make sure our houses are clean, our neighborhoods are clean, but also making sure that you are not walking and you are towing the line, right? So that's sort of disciplining, or as they say, very, very, to the point in Delhi, apni auqaat mein raho. So it is that kind of disciplining technology of keeping people who are already in a strata in their auqaat, right? To maintaining that auqaat structure is what this has been put into place for, right? So CCTVs, for instance, like this is obviously, but again a great place to be having this conversation from Cyberabad. CCTVs everywhere, right? Being sold as a public good, as a public commodity. But if you see, and this is as lawyers, we see this very, very happening on a day-to-day basis, is when they said, oh, CCTV is a great way to be able to keep tabs on the police, right? Police station mein CCTV laga do. But very interestingly, only where there is this one spot in the police station where this person who has been illegally detained is subjected to torture, where the CCTV never works. So when you call for the footage, वो बोलेंगे हमारा वो camera काम नहीं कर रहा था. So very, strategically there are certain forms of technology when it is used to create accountability that fail, right? And like my colleague Sanjana is here, who's worked on a case where we were trying to get call data records of a person who had been charged for attempt to murder. He was never at that place, and he had actually made a call to the police to say there is an instance of violence that has happened here. And these calls to the police employee, when you dial 100, that is data that is used by the police to actually identify which are areas where miscreants are living, right? So if I am calling and saying, oh, there is this X area of Cyberabad where this is happening, they will say that's a crime hotspot because a lot of people are saying instances of violence are happening there, or we're receiving calls of help from that particular area, right? So in this particular case, we tried to push the court to say, pick up that 100 call record, which will prove to you that this person was nowhere around where this instance of violence was happening, which is evidence of the fact that he was not involved in this incident, right? But we were not given those records. But this is the way in which which is where, community level fact findings that come into place, right? Where then you go there and you speak to people that were present, or in the case of, where CCTV footage is conveniently unavailable when somebody has been tortured in custody, is where then you push to say, okay, look at the internal injuries that this person faced, or you approach commission. So that kind of documentation, when was this person arrested? You are required to be in custody for not more than 24 hours. But, there were people who saw and said, "Isko 2 din pehle leke gaye the," which shows that the arrest records were fudged. And I think this is the kind of community level documentation which, people who, again, in development sector speak, we would like to call it as paralegals, are actually the ones who are creating this kind of evidence, counter evidence, and doing the job of investigation which an entire agency has been, historically on paper determined to do, right? And then that is the process that facilitates people's access to justice, right? When somebody's been subjected to violence, it's not CCTV footage which is saying that they've been subjected to violence. It is this kind of documentation by lawyers, by family members, by community members, which then, allows for the court to then finally, 20 years later, take cognizance of the fact that this person was subjected to violence. So I think people's lives have always existed in opposition to the technology, because the technology has always been part of a system that has been created in opposition to people's lives. And I think it's important to see that kind of dichotomy and people's relationship with that in that light.
Thank you so much, Nikhil. That's such an important way to also make sure that we are identifying the resilience within communities, and also the work that the communities have been doing since thousands of years. And we've seen technology evolving, but we also have seen communities building processes to ensure that when the technology fails, it doesn't work for them, then they have something to protect the members of the community. With that, I think we should take a few questions from the audience, and I don't know how much time we'll left with, maybe one question to begin with for each one.
Shall I go ahead? Yes.
Yes, please.
Please. So, my question is for everyone in the room here actually. Working with human rights defenders who have to deal with so much from the government side as well as from the side of the communities that they are working with, how do we encourage them to ask the right questions for themselves? What I have understood by the discussions that I've seen since morning is that, like Osama mentioned, we're talking about Aadhaar all the time, but we are not asking the right questions. So how do we encourage the people who are human rights defenders, who are CSOs, who are in the field, to ask the right questions for themselves and for the communities that they work?
May I? Yeah. I think there is two ways in which I would respond to that. One is, I think communities are defending their human rights and they've been doing so historically. So if there is somebody who's working with communities as allies, they work with them, not for them, because that is the sort of partnership that is envisioned in that framework. Also, I think people have been asking these questions, right? It's always a matter of what kind of questions are considered to be pertinent questions and acquire center stage, and then what are rendered to the margins, right? So I think the idea is, if somebody sees themselves as working with communities, representing communities in certain ways, for them to be able to then make way or create that sort of bridge for people's questions that they've been asking for a very long time to then be platformed and for those, because those questions are being asked.
Yeah.
I mean, for a lot of us, perhaps in this room, a lot of these questions are new, but and it's not just questions that are being asked, because those are lives that people are living, right? So they're also engaging with those questions on a day-to-day basis. Like, predictive policing is new for us. People have always known, they have been at the receiving end of some kind of prediction that always ends with one answer. You know, so I think there is a need to center those, right? Like, there is so much of, you know, speaking from the margins, but there is a need to reorient the center.
So, but, yeah, sorry. Please go on. This is a question. Yeah, and it's a separate question, maybe. You want to complete? So, my question was more on, you mentioned CCTV is conveniently in police stations, it's not there. But what about the phone camera? Like, there are a lot of citizens with cameras. Like, have you seen in recent instances footage captured by citizens helping in court, you know, get more people justice? Or like, I'm just trying to figure what can people do, like, you know, to get.
I mean, people have tried to create that, right? Like, people do, you know, people have those cameras, but it's also just one of those, like, it's very difficult to, you know, because when one uses that kind of evidence in court, which means this person has to testify, right? It just means that then it opens them up to being targeted, and it puts them in a precarious position. So so I think very often going back to what Osama was saying earlier about social media, like, I think a lot of people, particularly from marginalized communities, have used like TikTok, right? Like, during the pandemic, a lot of these videos of police, you know, beating people up, or vegetable vendors, etc., were being used on TikTok, which is why the first platform that went when they said this is a Chinese conspiracy was TikTok, right? Facebook, Instagram, X, Twitter, whatever that is, are still around and are thriving. So I think it's very interesting, because that was a medium where people were creating that evidence and were creating that body of knowledge, right? So it's also interesting how, you know, you go after which platform, and what platform is also then considered to be authentic information and non-authentic information.
You know, the person who has taken video Manipuri, he was arrested.
Exactly. So it's always, because you're living there, right? So it's
I think what it actually brings to fore is a very critical aspect of how digital enables your personal identity to get targeted. At the heart of it, that's the aspect where the enablement of your personal identity, be it by way of the kind of a device you own, the location that you're at, what you're doing on your phone, and how that can be used to make you a target or paint a target on you by any kind of a power. And this is not restricted only to whether it's a government or whether it's the police or whether it is about any kind of person who has access to that kind of control. And that we are seeing that as to how your posts are limited depending on the topic. So when you understand personal identity versus the challenge of digital control, that's the fundamental point which is asking, what's the question to ask?
Yeah.
So Shivashish, we have back-to-back sessions.
Okay. So let's bring these conversations when end, and I'm sure there will be more conversations outside of this room that will continue to happen until the end of the day. But thank you so much, Osama and Nikita, but also all of you for joining and engaging. I think I think even in this 45 minutes that we talked together, we discussed a lot, starting from the culture of identification that we have and the lack of culture of anonymity and culture of identity, which is enabling and empowering to the resilience and the social innovations that communities have created themselves to ensure that there is access to justice, when technology fails or when technology doesn't work for them. Is there any last sort of concluding thoughts both of you want to add? Do we have time for that?
No, I think
No,
Okay.
also, I mean, we are also quite happy with the conversation because we were having this conversation before, and even the next room where we are also going, a similar kind of conversation is happening.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, all of you.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Subhashish. You can go back to sleep.
Thank you, Subhashish. Good night. Go to bed now.
Thank you.
Go to bed now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
We have another session on Acode here.
Acode.
After that, yeah. No, not now. After the memory. And at 3:15 there's a report release of Manipur International.
Oh, yes. Wow. Fantastic sessions, huh? Great sessions. We cannot escape not being recognized by the surveillance people to seek help.
Every session it keeps coming up, so I feel like hopefully they will stop here and after that they will tomorrow and the rest of the
Raj, who is the co-founder of Khana Cherry Foundation, Ashwini, who is the co-founder of Travelers University, and Govind, who is a founder of Protsan.
No, not for
Okay.
I am representative of
Have Nicola from
Yeah.
Karachi, who runs the storytelling.
So, like you, I would like to start with Suraj. Would you want to like share your journey about founding Khana Cherry? What was the
So, Khana Cherry, the word as it indicates is you need food, right? We started in the first pandemic, first lockdown, 29th March. It was like a one-day drive. We didn't know how long the lockdown. We are essentially not a non-profit, or we're not from the social place. It's just a collective of Mumbai citizens. So we started thinking that it's a few days of requirement of food. And we went down on the ground and we saw it was not few people, but hundreds and thousands of people who didn't have access to food. The government was doing something, but it wasn't reaching most people. And that was the starting point, and initially it was just a 10-day thing where we sourced in some resources and tried to give 500 meals a day. But once we got on the ground, we realized it was not hundreds, but we needed 50,000 meals a day, and there was nobody providing them. The government was doing something, and then we realized that we can't do it alone. We needed the entire city to respond. So we gave a call out to the city, and Mumbai is a very kind city. And we have some history of, that's how we connected with them. We worked with the Election Commission as a group of citizens in 16, 17. So we had some credibility as a group of citizens, so we could collate a lot of people together, and especially from the art community, the first few people were the stand-up comedians who responded. We started doing, and these were the first Zoom sessions on, comedy sessions on Zoom. They were also reacting to the lockdown. They started giving us shout-outs, and as the pandemic extended, we basically got the entire city together, especially on the art community. There were people who were dancing for us, there were people who were creating poems, and these are not like large artists or large influencers. And from our side, what we did was we made it easy for everybody to be part of this. So if somebody wanted to sing, we didn't tell them that you sing and get us money. We created the platform for them, we created the crowdfunding campaign for them, and they could just do their art and contribute, and that was the starting point. And I think initially it was common citizens doing something, and looking at that larger, I remember Euphoria came organically, they did like an online. But this was not us going to agencies and saying we need influencers. This was like organically the city responding, and this was the first lockdown. Second lockdown, it went further ahead, but people started baking stuff, and without even us being in touch with them, right? They would just put our crowdfunding link, do some micro campaigns, and over a period of 2 years, we kind of mobilized enough funds to like fund 7 million meals, 70,000 gross tickets. And the most critical part, when the migrant crisis hit, we were in a position to like work with the BMC and do 100,000 meals a day. So that was like the starting point of what we did. Also during the lockdowns, one was the art partnerships and the outreach, but we also partnered with hundreds of NGOs on the ground. And there we realized that hunger was not just a pandemic thing which needed attention, we needed to go on. So we registered as a non-profit, and there also we have other ways. We have a couple of community kitchens. We don't source food from outside to feed the needy. We find solutions within that. Plus, we have some cool, we use technology, we use a chatbot. We partner with organizations working on the ground. We have an SOS systems. Maybe about that, Mithila can talk about the community kitchen vertical and also maybe unheard voices and some of the storytelling. We don't show our beneficiary faces. We don't use sob stories. It's a kind of a disadvantage because that kind of moves people to donate. But because we started as a citizen collective, we have that one rule, and there are other ways we tell our stories.
So I think just taking forward from what Swaraj said, but just giving you a little back end information. Someone asked me to introduce myself. I'll say I'm a Bhatakti Atma with a camera because I really like telling stories. And so when the pandemic hit, I was of course doing my full-time job, but I could not sit on the sidelines, and I thought there were stories that needed to be told, and they needed to be told with empathy. And it was that need of the hour where people needed to know, and I think what we do at Khana Chahiye, hunger has always been existent in the city. It was just amplified during the lockdown, and it was visible during the lockdown. What we did during the lockdown was different because we sourced food through kitchens, hotel kitchens. But during the second lockdown, we thought it was essential that our beneficiaries also be included in the solution. They become part of the mechanism because Mumbai, or many cities as such, don't have a crisis mechanism system or a functioning crisis mechanism system. And you couldn't depend, and I think that's what also the lockdown kind of showed us, that you couldn't solely depend on the government. The civil society and other organizations were like a patchwork of organizations that sort of came together that helped build the resilience that we saw and the aid that it gave. So the community kitchen was a model that we had where we got the women from the community who were beneficiaries, who wanted to step up. If you went and you spoke to them, they said कि भाई हम घर पे नहीं बैठना चाहते. We don't want to sit home. We ourselves want to be contributing to the fight and tell us what we can do. And these were self-help groups that we sort of fired up. And we set up a small kitchen. So the kitchens don't belong to Khana Chahiye. They belong to the community, they belong, and the operations are looked after by all the women who are employed. So we have two kitchens, one in the heart of the city, which is at Kurla, which is run by a minority community. There are 10 women who work in the community. And there's the other one which goes beyond Mumbai, which is the MMR region, which is in Ulhasnagar, which is run by a transgender collective. And this was very consciously one of the decisions that we wanted to bring them into the fold, because usually, and even during the first lockdown, we had the trans community who were beneficiaries, but we wanted to also put them on the other side and make sure that they were helping not only their community, but they also empowered themselves. So we did that, and we have the kitchens that are running, and like how Swaraj mentioned, there are a lot of times where we do want to talk about the ground realities, but we want to keep in mind that, and like I said, that I'm a Bhatakti Atma with a camera. I know that that comes with a certain privilege because you always have the camera in your hand and you're looking at someone else and you're telling their story. And I think that should be also onto them, where you are allowed
or you take their consent, their permission to, try to tell their story. So that's what we did even during we still continue that idea, where we blur the faces of beneficiaries who are getting the food. We do not show them on our social media, you will never see any of the faces. When we talk about what we do at the community kitchen, we try to talk about definitely the beneficiaries, because they are the absolute needy in the bracket of who need the food day to day to survive. But we try to talk about these stories by talking about how they empower our kitchen women. So I'll probably talk about 2 stories from the kitchen. The ones who are employed and who are working, someone named Hamida Babi, she runs the operations. She was one of the first women who stood up from a community and said that her daughters, she's got 2 daughters, who need to be educated. And she was a victim of domestic abuse at her house, but she wanted to step up, and even when she did so, in the community there were threats that she and her daughter received on multiple occasions, where they were warned that if they'd step out, they would get acid thrown on them. They would have people from the community walking up to them when they were, attending classes or having that access to outside facilities. But I think she powered through, and to be able for her to say today that the salary that she receives from the kitchen goes to her loan that she's taken for her daughters who are pursuing nursing is a big deal. So it's not just we feeding the ones who are absolute need, but also empowering women who are for the first time in their entire life stepping out and are able to do something and contribute to the households. I think that's what sort of makes it a wholesome story for us. In just line to that, I will mention with the multiple times we interacted with closely with the social sector, we found these stories very intriguing. So we thought we wanted to give these women and these children an agency of their own to tell their own stories. So myself, Bhavya Gupta and Neeraj Shethe, we started a platform called The Unheard Voices. And what we did through that was go and interact with a small community. And I mean, it's not an unknown fact that women and children are like a unit and a very integral part. So when we spoke to the women, we'd often find the children lingering around and we'd interact with them. So we wanted to ask these women about their aspirations, about their history and what they wanted to do, what the children wanted to do. And we did small interventions like that. And maybe you can like look through what we've built with the Unheard Voices. And though we had consent from them, wanting to tell their stories, we have drawn on their faces, and the idea is to take this the platform way ahead, and the day where the women like Meenu, Jasmine are comfortable telling their stories with their faces, we are happy to have them go up. Until then, we want to make sure that they are keeping their dignity, they have an agency to talk about what they do. And some of these women spoke about how their husbands had lost their jobs during the pandemic and how they stood up for them with the skills that they had at hand. So Jasmine could make dosas. So she put a dosa stall right outside her house. And she would charge a certain amount if you needed extra chutney or half a dosa. So what we wanted to also do is make this platform into a space where we also can help them crowdfund. So the donors or anyone who wants to listen to their stories can track their progress. Or Jasmine also can tell that, I think I'm getting bulk orders now. I'm doing party orders. Someone's giving me a large scale order. These are the things that came up during conversations with them. Is I think I need a longer pan. So that's them stepping up for the first time, talking about what they want and they think they deserve. So we're very happy that what started as khana chahiye, what started as giving food has sort of slowly amplified into giving women voices, getting them to step up for the first time, empowering them, and having these smaller bubbles of wholesomeness that you'd probably be able to see if you look at the page that we have built. So yes, that's us.
In addition, I'll just add one thing, that because we couldn't talk about our beneficiaries, we started a blog series, Stories Behind the Mask. So we started speaking about our volunteers, and that led to more people relating to our campaign and kind of identified that this is a city's campaign. This is not an NGO, and that helped us kind of build it into a movement. And as Mithila mentioned, there are a lot of stories on the ground of resilience. It's not just of need. So that we amplified through Hamida Babi and all these people. They are our, they are our spokespeople. So that has enabled whatever.
I think as someone who lived in Bombay, I can also clearly see that how Bombay, like a city like Bombay, can actually do this because it also has the mill workers' history and a lot of trade unions, and then how civil society actually come together and then create something like this. Actually, I want to you. So your organization actually, moves from different initiatives like Khanna Chalani. So we want to talk about, how did you come up with that design of working, and what is the origin of travel?
So the story of Travelers University, I think it's a story of a project which received support at the right time, being converted into an organization, and now creating a support structure for other people. So Travelers University, we are now 5 years old, but the story started in 2015-16 when Rahul, who is one of the co-founders, he designed a gap project for himself. It was his individual project. It was called 52 Parinte, which is the name of the fellowship also. His idea was, why is that the whole society is asking me to become a doctor, an engineer, an advocate or something, very similar things. And what he found was, there are no role models. His parents knew the same kind of people, his school teachers knew the same kind of people, even the college professors knew the same kind of people. Now he said, I don't want to be any of these things. So how do I find my own mentors? How do I find my own teachers? He said, I'll do that myself. So he set out on a journey. He said, I'll travel for 1 year. So that is why the 52 stands for the number of weeks. And he said, I'll stay for 1 week with each of them. And I'll learn from them directly, very simple idea. And I will document them, because he is a writer and he wanted to do video, he wanted to learn video making. So that was his learning. So he said, I'll make videos, I'll document stories. So that was the genesis of the story. Now when the support part comes, he met Osama sir in one of the meetings, one of the gatherings. So I was actually with him that day. We were presenting a small idea that we were looking for, because he needed some funds and some basic computer setup and all. And Osama sir, he gets intrigued with ideas. He said, "Kal office aa jana." So he went to office. He said, "Ye ho jayega, project ho jayega, you can go." And he became a fellow, And that is how we are connected with DF actually. So it's a long connection that way. But that investment in one idea has led to the organization today. And that is what we believe in. How can we create this support structure for more people? So he set out the back end and everything was taken care by DF. There are 52 stories. There are 52 videos which came up, and he travelled more than 25,000 kilometers in one whole year, basic transport and all. He met all kinds of people, educators, a person who has gone to jail, turned an organic farmer right now. He met people making pottery, he met people making different kinds of crafts, whatever he wanted to learn in that time. And then what happened was, he was receiving a lot of people who said, "Hame bhi ye journey karni hai. We want to embark on such a journey, but we can't do it alone. Can you support us? How do we do this?" So then, through more interactions and through more brainstorming, he said, let's set up a platform. And that is how the name came, the Travelers University. So it's a platform for people who want to travel, but for learning. Because right now a lot of travel is happening for tourism and leisure, which is the downside, I don't want to get into that, but it's creating a negative impact. So so that's what, and the name university came because right now what we believe is the whole universe, you can learn from everyone, you can learn from everywhere, from anywhere. But the idea of university has been usurped. Right now university is just a big building where you can get a degree or a diploma. Nobody talks about what kind of learning I want to get. Nobody talks about why actually I do want to learn about engineering, or why do I want to do an engineering course. It's mainly connected with the placement, or mainly connected with what will I get after, what is I am going to do during this 4 years, nobody is talking about. So we also wanted to demystify this word university. We wanted to break it. We design experiential learning programs using travel as a pedagogy, and we find ourselves, we are working on alternative education, and most of the programs are also focused on alternative livelihoods. So we call them livelihoods. So it's basically a combination of two words, alive plus livelihood, and it is a term which has been coined by some of our friends, and we asked them whether we can use this term, and they were very happy to do that. What we have realized by talking to people, and again talking about an urban youth, because that is where we work. So with most of the urban youth, a lot of people with whom we interact, they're not finding joy in what they are doing, or they're not finding a sense of meaningful work in what they are doing. So what we realized was, okay, but at the other spectrum, during our travels, we are meeting so many people who don't feel like they're working. It feels like it is part of their life, so they feel alive while doing it. So then we realized, how do we bridge this gap? So for people who want to get into a livelihoods, how do we bridge this gap? And that is where the fellowship that we do came up. So we wanted to continue with the name 52 Parinde, because we thought if 152 Parinde can lead to one Travelers University, so if there are many people doing it can lead to many different initiatives. So the idea is very basic. We focus on self-directed learning. So you choose your own teachers, you choose your own mentors, you choose how you want to learn, you choose when you want to learn. So the whole ownership of learning is on the learner. And the fellowship works, we take 8 fellows. So each fellow, they will choose a topic or a domain that they want to explore. Mostly it lies in the alternate realm, for which there are no courses outside. So people have done politics of communities, how do communities functions. People have done alternative education, people have done conservation and coexistence, people have chosen art as a tool for social change, some of the fellows have done natural way of growing. And what they do is, for 7 to 8, for 4 months they travel, they can go to any part of India depending on where they find these mentors whom we call, and they stay with them for 2 weeks. So each fellow will stay with one person for 2 weeks. They shadow them basically. So the Parinde have to arrange their stay, their food and everything at their place. But like the fellows have stayed from a mosque to a temple to a community center to a farmhouse to anywhere where the people can arrange. That's the diverse experiences that the fellows have had. And they learn directly. So what we are focusing here is more than the academic knowledge. You understand the nuances of what actually working in that field means. What are the challenges as well as the opportunities, and what is the ground reality? What is the actual thing that happens when you work? Because conservation from outside might look like something which is very different, but what does that day-to-day mean? So if I want to get into that field, I get into that field doing the actual reality and not from a utopian idea or a very romanticized idea of social work, and so that happens because they are day in and day in living with those people, so that they get a very holistic understanding of that domain. And how do we connect the art side of it is because we also wanted to redefine the role models. As I was saying, why do people keep on going into the same field is because they do not have reference points. So today if I want to be a butterfly conservationist, how many people do know that first of all, whether that's a livelihood, second of all, who is working that on in India, third of all, what does it mean? But then there are people who have made butterfly parks, private butterfly parks. There are people who have made a community butterfly parks. So these are the people whose stories, so we all the fellows, wherever they go, they write the stories of the people from both the lenses. So we use the personal lens, which is the personal motivation lens, and then the livelihood lens. What does it mean to get into the livelihood? Because we feel storytelling has been prevalent from the history of oral tradition or oral storytelling is where why we are right now talking about a lot of things, you know. But storytelling also needs connection. How do you connect with those stories? So that is why the personal element of these people is very important for us. So all these stories use that personal lens to make them relatable, to make them more easily identifiable with the youth. And then the fellows also use art for their expression of their experiences. So the book also contains their experience of each and every place wherever they went. Some people have used art for it, some people write it, some people make videos, some people draw, some people sketch. So that liberty is with them to use any form of art that they want to use to express themselves, because that is another thing that we realize, like each individual is very different in how they learn and how they function, which is lacking in the current education system, you know. There everybody has to be fit into one kind of learning methodology, but in the fellowship we follow a very different learning methodology for each fellows. So they have that liberty to how do they want to learn, how they want to, as much as possible, there are certain things which they have to do. So for example, even for the story writing, right now the fellows can only write in 3 languages, that is Hindi, English and Malayalam, because those 3 languages we understand within the team. So we could only extend it to that. In future we would also want them to extend beyond that, because that also becomes a restriction for many people. But we, in our own ways, we find different ways. There was one person who wanted to write in Marathi. We did Marathi translation to Hindi, then Hindi to English. So that effort from our side we do put into it, just to accommodate a lot of different learning methodologies and also to accommodate different kind of people. And these stories, they get onto our website, they also get on Vikas Sangam website, they also get on DF website. We feel we want to, like I was talking about a livelihood, the larger goal is to make a livelihood more visible, more relatable, and then also to create those support structures, which is first of all is information sharing, that such a thing exists. Second is what are the resources that are available in terms of online. Third is how do we connect them to these people. So for example, today if somebody wants to work on butterfly conservation or waste management, we are building up, we have already built a platform, it is called livelihood.org. So it has information that way. What are the knowledge required, skill set required, mindset required, what are the books that are available, who are the people who are working on it, what are the workshops that are happening, what are the different fellowships happening, all that event calendar is also there. And at the same time also these different stories, not just by us, but which have been curated by the whole ecosystem is there. So another thing that we do is we work at ecosystem level. So the platform, we are just anchoring it, but we are also asking more people to send in their stories and to put out more information there. So it's a collaborative platform that we are building. And then apart from that, the support system that we are creating, then another thing is just connecting with people. Connecting people with different opportunities, connecting people with different fellowships, connecting people with different people that ways. And in that ways we are connected to a lot of alternatives happening in India. Alternatives to energy, alternatives to education, alternatives to health, alternatives to different things. Basically the alternatives to the dominant model of development that we are following, which we believe is not working for more than 1% of the population, which is again the top billionaires. So what are the models that can be that are an answer to this, or what are the models that can propose solution for this? So yeah, that's a little bit about it. Thank you.
So who are your mentors?
Osama sir, definitely. Then we have Ashish Bhai from Kalpurix. He's from
Pune. Kalpurix.
We have THI, Lalita ji and Ji Hai also. So that we are connected to different people there.
I like whenever hearing and speak about it, I find it really cool that people are actually traveling and learning, and also like this idea that this is how the education should be, and like how the
बेस्ड एब्यूज, एजुकेशन बेस्ड, इन जगहों पे जब वो लड़कियां रहती हैं, स्लम एरियाज में, दिल्ली की हम बात करें जहाँ से हम लोगों का सेंटर शुरू हुआ आज से 13 साल पहले, तो उन एरियाज में जब वो लड़कियां रहती हैं हर तरीके के एब्यूज़ को उन्हें झेलना पड़ता है। अब जब हम चाइल्ड एब्यूज़ की बात करते हैं और चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन की बात करते हैं तो उससे एक स्टेप पीछे हमें जाकर देखना होता है कि अगर चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन और चाइल्ड एब्यूज़ की हम बात करेंगे तो एक स्टेप पीछे आपको फैमिली प्रोटेक्शन देखना पड़ेगा कि अगर वो फैमिली प्रोटेक्ट है, जिसे हम कहते हैं एक्सो सिस्टम पूरा, कि अगर फैमिली प्रोटेक्ट है तब वो जाके चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्ट हो पाएगा। तो चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन के साथ साथ उसकी फैमिली प्रोटेक्शन पे काम करते हैं कि अगर वो फैमिली हमें वर्नेबिलिटी मैपिंग करती है कि ये फैमिली गवर्नमेंट लिंकेजेस हैं इनके पास या नहीं है, जितने लिंकेजेस कम होते जाएंगे उतना ही एब्यूज का केस बढ़ता चला जाएगा कम्युनिटी में, क्योंकि जब वो फैमिली ही प्रोटेक्टेड नहीं है तो वो चाइल्ड कहाँ से प्रोटेक्टेड होगा। तो पहले हमारा काम चाइल्ड, और देन फिर हम देखते हैं कि ये फैमिली प्रोटेक्टेड है या नहीं। हमारा मेन काम जो रहता है दिल्ली में और दिल्ली से बाहर के स्लम बेस्ड जो एरिया है वहाँ से लड़कियों के स्कूल्स में एडमिशन कराना। रैग पिकर्स हैं, बेगर्स कम्युनिटी हैं, तो ये वो लोग हैं जिन्होंने कभी स्कूल देखा ही नहीं ना ये जाना चाहते हैं, क्योंकि अगर हम अपनी कम्युनिटीज में देखते हैं कि अगर एक आदमी कूड़ा बीन रहा है या रैग पिकिंग कर रहा है या कोई भी काम कर रहा है तो वो उसका बेटा भी वही काम करेगा या बेटी भी वही काम करेगी। तो हम चीज़ों को यहाँ पर ये देखना जरूरी है कि जो इंटरजनरेशनल चीज़ें चल रही हैं कि पहले वही हुआ फिर वही होता रहेगा, खासकर लड़कियों के केस में, तो वहाँ पर हमें ये चीज़ों में सुधार लाना है। तो जो प्रोत्साहन का काम करने का तरीका है वो हार्ट मॉडल पे काम करता है, HEART, हार्ट।
बहुत इंफॉर्मेशन दे रहे हो ना, we'll lose the translation, we'll do an English translation. Ashwini and Jenny, can you both help please?
So Prozac donation basically works in the birthday system, and birthdays but the family itself is secured is a question that there is. So whether the family has government linkages or they are connected with other systems of protection, that is something which they are working on.
Yes.
And there's another model which is called
हार्ट
model, which is going to
प्रोत्साहन हार्ट मॉडल पे काम करता है, HEART, हार्ट। H रिप्रेजेंट फॉर हीलिंग और हेल्थ, E रिप्रेजेंट फॉर एजुकेशन, A रिप्रेजेंट फॉर आर्ट्स, R रिप्रेजेंट फॉर रिकवरी फ्रॉम ट्रॉमा। वो बच्चियाँ जो घर में ट्रॉमा सह रही हैं या कहीं भी वर्क स्कूल में ट्रॉमा सह रही हैं, घर में हैं कि कभी अब्यूज हुआ उसके संग किसी भी तरह का, हो सकता है घर के अंदर उस चार दीवारी के अंदर जहाँ से उसको बाहर नहीं जाने दिया जाता उसी के अंदर अब्यूज हुआ, तो उस ट्रॉमा से रिकवरी हीलिंग आपको धीरे धीरे करानी पड़ेगी। एंड T स्टैंड फॉर टेक्नोलॉजी, कि आप जब सारा काम कर लेंगे तो आपको टेक्नोलॉजी पे आके रुकना पड़ेगा कि आप उसको रिकवर कराया, आपने एजुकेशन दिलाई, सारा काम कराया, तो उसके बाद आपको टेक्नोलॉजी से उसको कनेक्ट कराना पड़ेगा। हमारे पास फेलोशिप प्रोग्राम है, डिजिटल लैब है हमारा दिल्ली में, तो वहाँ पर हम लड़कियों को डिजिटल स्टेम स्किल्स सिखाते हैं, विच इज साइंस, टेक्नोलॉजी, इंजीनियरिंग, मैथमेटिक्स, तो वो सारी चीज़ें हम उनको सिखाते हैं। उसके बाद फेलोशिप हमारे पास रहता है जिससे जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटीज प्रोवाइड करते हैं। तो जो हमारी साइकिल है वो ऐसा नहीं है कि हमने चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन शुरू करा वो बच्ची 12, 13, 14 साल के आके नहीं। वी हैव डिफरेंट सेंटर्स, हमारे पास बहुत सारे सेंटर्स हैं, 5 सेंटर्स हैं उस कम्युनिटी में। एक में एजुकेशन का काम होता है, एक में चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन का होता है। जब वो बच्ची, एक में लर्निंग सेंटर के वहाँ पर वो बच्ची पढ़ती है या वो लड़की पढ़ती है, जब उस लड़की ने 12वीं कर ली उसके बाद हम डिजिटल सेंटर में उसको भेजते हैं जहाँ पे वो स्टेम स्किल्स को सीखती है। देन हम जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटीज़ के लिए हम उनको रास्ते दिखाते हैं, हम एक पाथवे प्रोवाइड करते हैं कि जब आपको सारी चीज़ें देती स्टेम में आपको काम आ गया तो फिर हम जॉब अपॉर्चुनिटी के इनेबलर्स जो हम वर्ड यूज़ करते हैं वो अपनी उन लड़कियों को हम बनाते हैं।
So heart, like I think is told in English what it stands for. So the basic idea is child protection is the starting point, but then after the healing and what is the way forward. So that is where the tech part comes, wherein they have different centers where they teach them different around digital, also the STEM, science, tech, the STEM subjects, so that they can also after the healing part, but how do they lead a life. So that is also the important focus of the work that they do, and for that they have different kind of centers wherein different kind of programs they run.
प्रोत्साहन चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन या चाइल्ड एब्यूज पे DCPCR दिल्ली ब्रांच के संग काम करता है। अभी हमारे जो ट्रेनर्स हैं, जो ऑफिसर्स हैं, चाइल्ड प्रोटेक्शन ऑफिसर्स हैं, उन्होंने जयपुर में ट्रेनिंग करी 56 कोचेस के साथ, स्पोर्ट्स कोचेस के साथ। तो हम बात करते हैं कि वो स्पोर्ट्स कोचेस काम करते हैं स्पोर्ट्स के फील्ड में, लेकिन चाइल्ड सेफ्टी की जब बात आती है या फिर उसको सेफ कैसे रखना है गर्ल्स को, तो उनके ऊपर ट्रेनिंग लेने की जरूरत पड़ती है। तो वो सारा काम प्रोत्साहन से कंटेंट डिलीवर का जिसे हम काम कहते हैं वो भी करता है। गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स में प्रोत्साहन के प्रोग्राम्स चलते हैं, एग्जाम स्टैम्प का काम, डिजिटल काम, प्रोत्साहन का गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में लेके जाते हैं, क्योंकि हमारे पास लैब्स हैं, सेंटर्स हैं, लेकिन एक लिमिट पे आके वो लैब्स और वो सेंटर रुक जाएंगे। लेकिन जब आप उसी मॉडल को गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स में लेके चले जाओगे, स्ट्रक्चर कर लोगे, तो फिर वहाँ पर आपको इन बिल्ड स्ट्रक्चर मिलेगा, आपको कंटेंट डिलीवर वहाँ पे करना है, जिससे आप बहुत ज़्यादा डेप्थ में काम कर सकते हैं।
So they are also working on delivering the content and training more people, because Prosan will have a limit in terms of what number of centers they can open. So they have done coaching with the sports coaches in Rajasthan recently with 56 coaches, and also in Delhi they are working with government schools so that their centers can be replicated in those schools, and it can be done at a bigger level that way. So because once the government gets involved into it, then more centers can come. Thank you.
If there are any questions, questions per se. It's very interesting. Talk from very different domains actually coming together. But you know, somebody who's so I'm Swati from Canada, South Asia, and I've had background in academia, of course, research, and recently moved into data synthesis type of methods. And we do, whenever we take up topics, we get a lot of funding for different, you know, big organizations like UNICEF and all that. And we do a lot of data synthesis for them. And we look at a lot of databases. So when we do evidence synthesis, just I'm telling you that we pick up a lot of data that comes from different sources. One of the sources like organizations like, you know, Prozahan, NGOs and other different things that are happening on the ground. So at the back of my mind, as an academician, I was thinking about ethics. When you talk about, you take pictures, you blur them, so there's a lot of translation of narratives, and of course it goes through different perceptions, really depends on the subjectivity. So I was thinking about ethics there as a researcher, but at the same time I was also thinking as a data analyst that how do you convert this information? Because now when I'm working with CSA, it's been over 2 years now, I'm thinking as researchers, as NGO people, as various stakeholders, there's so much important information, but this needs translation at some level, right? I think the bigger talk happening through this 3-day summit is how do you translate this information, whether it feeds into policy, it feeds, at least it reaches some relevant stakeholders who are actually using pen and paper to, you know, do some translation of work here, of data. Because you guys have excellent data, but what are we doing with that data? So one was that, and that converts to the Travelers University also, I think, where it's alternate education, it's experiential knowledge, all of that is fantastic, and of course it's moving away from mainstream education, what we do in classrooms and curriculum. But again, how is that experiential knowledge kind of connecting with, there has to be some kind of output. As a researcher myself, I've realized that, you know, with whatever training I've had, it needs some output to really find its footing out there, you know, relevance. Of course, it resonates, you know, it's wonderful, it's experiential, but what's the tangible outcome, let's just say that.
Can I come in? Like just thinking loud with you.
Yeah.
So for any policy change, say like for any systematic change, say for example in education right now, we have an education board which looks after what needs to go into the syllabus and what needs not, right? So there's one internal reform that happens from people within the education system who try to, you know, push for certain certain boundaries to push discourses which we think are very important for our society as well. And there's also an external push which also creates internal reform. And that external, that's where I would look at, I think, as a tangible, and the thinking loud, you know, that these kind of alternate models, Therefore, propose such solutions, propose such methods, propose such frameworks, which mainstream models are then, forced to consider and take cognizance of. So definitely in that sense, very timely.
I also want to the other question about data. Sometimes we also assume that it's the lack of data that is leading to the lack of policies. Like, people actually know people are dying of hunger. So,
on the contrary, yes, exactly. That's what I'm arriving at. There's no lack of data. The point is to make that data more accessible in a certain format which translate at some level. That's what I'm saying. There's a lot of data, impactful data, effective data. But the problem is the connectivity, how you actually linking that data. There's a big vacuum and gap in that sense. And I think it's very important. There's so much of interesting groundwork happening which is actually not getting communicated or translated at so many levels. So when we say academicians are in the ivory tower and so much of work is happening, true. But there are organizations who have come up with methods that help you bridge that. So I think cognizance of that fact, absolutely internal push, the world system theory. So when we have all this data, that's what I guess that's what I'm
saying. So we're building something called the hunger map of Bombay. So some of this data from the pandemic is not relevant because then it was a state of emergency. A lot of people needed help who don't need help now. So as I told you, we did 7 million meals and probably 1 million or more actual beneficiaries. So we have that data. We can put it up, we shared it with whoever government resources were there. But we continued the project ahead. So right now, whatever we're doing at the community kitchen level, we are collecting, it's not easy always to go and we're not from the social space, so we're partnering with people. We're collecting those beneficiary data as well. Plus we have an SOS grocery service. So the problem with the community kitchen, it's in one central part of Mumbai and another in the outskirts. So we don't have coverage of the entire city with cooked meals. But with grocery, we do have that. So that SOS service is through a WhatsApp chat, plus we have partnerships with TIS. TIS has in Mangpur, where they operate, they have a distress helpline. It's not for food, but it's for other issues. But they tell us every month which are the 30 families which require short-term grocery support. And they give us 18 fields of data, which we have collaboratively created, which gives us all aspects of socio-economic, why they need food at that point in time, or what is their employment status. That we can expand. Like for example, right now we are talking to Doctors Without Borders. They are working in one suburb where MTDR, like a strain of TB, which is really communicable and it renders people jobless for 6 months to 1 year. So, and if you are from the lower strata, you don't have any other source of income. So we're trying to get into, give them the supply, get that data, and the idea being that if we partner with more such people working on the ground, we're working with another organization which is called CSSC, which is Community Health Workers. They cover the entire western suburbs. So how we have pivoted since the pandemic is I know this is a session on art, but we did a lot of art and outreach in the first phase of Khana Chahiye. Now we're partnering with policy people and NGOs on the ground and trying to find the absolute needy. We're collecting this data. We try to work with the state government where we said this SOS service, we're getting the most genuine people in need. They don't have access to the PDS system. So the least the government can do is get them access to the system if they're legal and everything. But almost after 2 months of lobbying, we got to a place where we got a meeting with the minister and the government fell the next day. And the new government has come. So again, we're so I'm saying we have that thing in mind that just giving food won't solve the problem. And our approach now is just to partner with anyone, whoever's listening, whoever can solve it. Even in the community kitchens, we're giving food, but DEF has opened up a digital lab. So our approach has been just partner, we know it's too complex to solve. Our position is that we can get Mumbai to respond to anything. We can get the entire city together. But we realize for long-term solutions, it's not enough. Just giving money or creating awareness, we need real solutions. So that's the phase we are in.
And just building up on what Farad said, is the hunger map sort of looks at visualizing hunger. So subconsciously we're kind of aware where these communities exist, but we're not able to look at it at a map scale, so like what you're talking about research. So we're trying to plot it all out and trying to say Khana Chahiye alone can't be the solution at the end of things. So we're trying to figure how other stakeholders can come and what they can do. and how we can do. But we're trying to put that first ground rule in place, is to put that map out there to say, hey, this is what exists, this is the extent of the need, and here's how you can help, or do whatever you think you can. So that's
just to add, right, like if one old lady in South Bombay needs one evening meal, Khanachai can't open a community kitchen.
Yeah.
But if we can verify that this is a genuine thing, there are enough citizens in Bombay who can cook an evening meal and get it. That. So one is the policy side use case of the Hunger Map and working with government. I look at it, I'm very skeptical about government coming in. So I am looking at it, how do we make citizens involved and how do we use technology, and that's the role we see evolving.
Are you closing? No, I was just going to say just one thing, just food for thought. I think your question is very valid. I work with data, we do a lot of research in my organization, but I also think what these examples show, which is something that I've been thinking a lot over the last decade, is that we also need to confront how research is done. And this idea that everything has to be a piece of data, an outcome, it doesn't always is very helpful. There are other ways of documenting experience, documenting realities, and you are doing that already. I was trying to find your thing, I can't find it. So you have to tell me where it is. There's so many unheard voices somehow. But anyway,
well said.
But no, there are so many. I was like, oh my God. I didn't know there was like a whole movement of unheard voices. But anyway, there's other ways of documenting reality, and I think part of what we need to do and to need to think about is how do we do that differently? How do we start documenting and really pushing a different way of understanding how we can actually influence policymakers, influence you as a researcher, influence myself with different ways of thinking, alternative ways of thinking. And to me, that's what I find really fascinating about your projects. I mean, these are projects that have a need, right? That there's a demand, there's, abuse of women remains a horrible problem all over the world. Everybody should know that. Everybody should already know. How many more pieces of data do we need to prove that women are being violated on a daily basis by men and others, including people in power, right? I mean, what else do we need to do? So I don't think that the way that we've been using data to prove things is enough anymore. We need to think about alternative ways of documenting. And so, writing, stories, videos, I think this is where I actually feel that technology can be kind of refreshing. But I also think it's a way that it's like people that are working in your project at Travelers University make it really exciting because they can also do things in a way that is completely unstructured and then eventually could become more, part of our everyday way of thinking. So anyway, I just wanted to put it out there. Maybe don't think about data, maybe don't think about that way. I mean, Jenny, you're going to be doing some work with our organization, and what we're doing is ethnographic research. One of the reasons why we do that, and we've done these over the years, is that I'm a true believer in ethnographic research, and I feel like that needs to get much larger versus like the traditional data and everything. Even if you have some pieces of data, put some face to it. So I just wanted to say that I think what you all are doing is really good in each of your own spaces, and I hope we get to see more of that. It also is more connected to the communities. So I hope that's okay. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm happy for including this. That is exactly what we needed.
So you must tell me where do I go for unheard places.
I'm ready for lunch. And after this, we are releasing the international on report, which can be
Are both of the projects related to? I know that Travelers University Instead, what about your project? Is it also one of the many projects that you all work with?
No, it's actually part of one training which we do, which is called Day2.
Oh, the Acode, yeah.
It's part of it. All of them are fellowship.
Yes, I saw that. That's, okay, great.
It's under education. And what we do is researchers when they
There's so many, there's different voices. I didn't know. And I didn't know that
assess
there's much discrimination.
we have a
Where is that gap? There's so many other
ఏమైంది ఏదో వస్తుంది
ఈడ నువ్వు ఎఫ్4 ఓపెన్ చేసి ఈడ చూడు
వచ్చింది చూడే అనే
ఇంకో మీద ఫిఫ్త్ది
నీకు పంపినా
ఫిఫ్త్ పంపించిన
నీకా
ఎందుకన్నా నువ్వు ఇంటికి ఫోన్ చేసిన
ఓపెన్ కాలే కదా
అవసరకే సార్ అందుకే సార్
అదిలే నీకు చూసి అదృష్టం లేదు కానీ నువ్వు
ఇంటర్వ్యూ చేస్తుంది కష్టపడి
ఎవరు వస్తున్నారు
లైవ్ బంద్ చేసి బ్రేకులు చేసిన
రికార్డ్ కానీ
ఇప్పుడు మీ ఇద్దరు కడికేనా లేదు
ఎవరు లేరు
కానీ రికార్డ్ అవుతుంది
పైన కూడా రికార్డ్ అవుతుంది
రికార్డ్ అవుతుంది మన తెలియదు
పైన ఎంతకి అవుతుంది అన్న
అవును లైవ్లో రికార్డ్ అవుతుంది అంట కదా
మళ్ళా
Recording in progress.
क्या हुआ? 5 minutes. So you just going to fix it at that point. So it will take some 5 minutes.
आवाज नहीं आएगा to what has been happening in Manipur. So the focus was more on collecting the narrative of people who have been affected by the internet shutdown. And it's co-authored by Osama, me and Royal. We also have Dylan joining us from Manipur, who's an assistant professor in Manipur, who is also the respondent of our study. So I'll just introduce like a little, I'll set the premises of this discussion about internet shutdown and what is the context in which we're having a discussion on internet shutdown. And then I will actually ask Dylan to give us an update about what is happening in Manipur and then what has been happening over there. And then I can actually, like, whatever is missed out in that narrative, I can add from the report. That is how we plan the session. Osama will also join the session and then he will give a concluding remark. So just to, Dylan, I will give a context to internet shutdown and after that you can speak. So I'll start. So basically in 2016 the United Nations Human Rights Commission declared internet access a basic human right. So not surprisingly, India was one of the 17 countries who actually opposed this resolution. So the country continues to be the largest violator of internet rights, executing at least 84 internet shutdowns in 2022. India was in the world like in the first half of 23, the assessment, India was also leading in internet shutdown after Iran. Internet shutdowns are the legal post-internet access which immediately impact the citizens in a particular location. As almost all the day-to-day activities in the modern world actually take a pause when an internet shutdown is happening. So while some of the internet shutdowns are actually brief, like for example in Rajasthan, when there is a government exam going on, they actually shut down the internet so that people don't really, look at their phone while they are writing the exam. So they actually shut down the internet in their state. So there are these smaller shutdowns, and then we have this longer shutdowns. For example, in Jammu and Kashmir, we had a 370-day long shutdown. 552 days shutdown. And so India witnessed yet another long shutdown in Manipur where the internet was turned off on May 3rd. Mobile internet has been banned in the state since May 3rd. It was briefly restored on September 23, only to be shut down again on September 26. The ban was the recent report is that it was extended till October 31st. As of July 4th, the Manipuri, as per the data of the government, 142 people died due to the violence in Manipur, and several of them have been displaced. Metis, who constitute more than half of the population, hold the largest representation in the state assembly, so which also underscores the power imbalances within the shutdown and what kind of truth is coming out and what is not. So Digital Empowerment Foundation and Council for Social and Digital Development actually spoke to a few people. So we have Dylan, who was one of our respondents in the study. He's an assistant professor from Manipur. So Dylan would actually give us an update about what is happening, what has been happening in Manipur and what is the situation now. Over to you, Dylan.
Is it my audio?
Yes, yes.
Hello. Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Let's. I believe that this is happening in Hyderabad.
Yes.
Yeah. Like Hyderabad, I have a very special thing for Hyderabad. I did my integrated master's in political science in HCU, Hyderabad Central University. So yes, it's good that you all are from Hyderabad, and yeah. It's, about the internet situation. Actually, you said made hard, but even prior to that, the district where I'm from, internet was shut down on the 27th of April, I think, because on the 27th of April there was some arsoning which was happening in the town. There was some open gym to be inaugurated by the chief minister, and as a sign of protest, the CSOs and local people, there was this imposal of ban, and then due to that, some kind of violence erupted, and because of that, internet was shut down. But during those times, for one time, Wi-Fi was still operational, and the world or India got to know about the internet only on May 3rd. And so prior to that, in the Jharkhand district, internet was also shut down. And how it affected was that on the 30th of April, there was this Manipur Civil Service exam. Even I went for going for the exam as well. And most of the people, wasn't familiar with the layout of Nepal and everything, and so finding a center for exam also was very difficult during that time. And yes, and coming back, and I will talk about later on the previous months, but right now, the situation right now is that there is no mobile internet, and broadband is still there. And in fact, in my locality, myself and one of my neighbor, we have Wi-Fi broadband. So basically, in our locality, our houses becomes like internet cafe. So every day, every night, we have people coming and using internet there. And the internet ban was shortly lifted on last week of September, and it was again banned because of that two Métis students. Their video resurfaced, and then because of that, there was mobilization of people from the Métis to force the securities and government to take action on it, and because of that, the government banned internet again, right? And
do you want to talk about your exam?
right, no. Yeah, my experience was also was very difficult, so to say. I was planning to apply for PhD in HCU, and then the internet ban happened, and I wasn't able to apply. And luckily, I saved my documents on my Google Drive. So my cousin, she did the application for me. She submitted a form for me, and only through that I was able to apply for it, and then went to write the exam for it. And fortunately, I got through the exam, and then I had to sit for the interview. And by the way, the exam was in Guwahati. I came to Guwahati, and then I came back, and after, I think it was the month of July, the result was out. And I had to sit for the online interview, and for that also, I had to travel again to the bordering. I don't go exactly to Mizoram, like it's somewhere near the border between Manipur and Mizoram. There we get internet, so I did my interview there. It's about 200 kilometers from my town. So I had to go there and then spend around roughly 18 hours to travel there. And yeah, that was my experience. And in education also, in the month of, if I'm not wrong, was it August, students, they did get a semester exam. And during those times also, finding material was very difficult. We had to resort to only offline materials. These days, most of the materials we find in online. But somehow, basically, the students wrote their exam without help of the internet, basically. And Wi-Fi or broadband was allowed for the public to have it. I think it was only on July, I think, before my interview, last week of July, and we were allowed to have Wi-Fi or broadband. After the office is more they receive us signature mark and the individual signature is there. And then if undertaking any kind of analysis, polls, anything which is posed using the latest, I the one who sign will be liable. So we have to take that undertaking. Only after we submit that to the geofiber people, only then we were able to get the internet access. But then here also, some people, they are, even after doing all this process also, their Wi-Fi is not connected. So it depends on the language. But I think most of the people who does this, it's working now. And another interesting thing which I noticed was that before
where is he?
Have reached quarterly was it. So and yeah, that was the picture which I found.
We losing you.
Lost.
I can just I had a conversation with him yesterday.
Is he in Impal?
Chandrapur.
Chandrapur. He's in the Brand area, so longer duration.
No, we were talking yesterday and then he was saying that, Jio, if you're actually, only Jio is providing internet and if you're actually recharging it, you have to recharge it for 3 months. So that's something which is sharing as an interesting fact that, how the telecom services are also, taking advantage of the situation and then he's planning, he has an Airtel connection. Yeah. I was just your connection not good. So I was just summarizing the discussion we had yesterday.
BSNL has shut down its network over there, obviously, because of that.
BSNL is working.
Airtel is Jio is yeah. Actually, during even before Jio fiber was introduced, Wi-Fi, BSNL was working. Mobile was very strong. Government buildings, the mini secretary and district information officer's office, they have access to internet. But it was very slow speed. Yeah.
Do you want to talk about
Yeah. So, Dylan, don't go if you are there, just be there. For many of you who are here, there are only 2 things that you can do in internet shutdown. Either you can suffer or you can write about the suffering. Right? I have a little example of Nuh shutdown, the recent one. Nuh, you must have heard in Haryana, where the recent communal violence had taken place. And it was a live example of our own organizations being part on the ground. The day, it was 29th of a particular month on which suddenly the
August?
Not August. August or September?
September. 29th September.
August.
No, it was August.
August, So 29th August or something, suddenly this happened and all that, and we started checking our center because in Nuh is one of the most 20-25 centers, digital centers there. But the unique thing about centers is that our center has our own network, right? We have our wireless network. So when you create your own wireless network or your own private network, you source the network from somewhere, the internet from somewhere. Now our source of internet is in Sohna, which is a part of Gurgaon.
and not noon. Right? And our center was busy and people were coming and center was working and anybody who was using our connectivity, they were working. And then we started getting phone in our office that hamara network government. We started thinking, oh, we are not working. They will come and tell, okay, what is happening, man? Where is it? And we took a decision to shut. We didn't want to or communication system for the design. But legally, you could. Internet shutdown, Darjeeling, and this is a very long internet shutdown, is not because of data to complete narrative or some application he was unable to do, and there are many people like that, which is nothing to do with any political agenda or Indian agenda, but they are suffering. So this new example, suffering were part of the people who were solution provider, and we had a solution, but we had no choice but to shut down, and make people suffer. And because most of your networks are so much reliable. So that is one live when we did the library bonding. So this and in Kashmir, by the way, it's very unique. How does it intertwine with business? I was talking to people in Kashmir, and I came to know that Jio has got special rights to lay cable in Kashmir. And even at the time of internet shutdown, Jio cable was functional in houses, and those who had it, they were talking on internet. And the third aspect, which is technological, somebody was talking about day before, the first day when the academic session was going on, is that this cable versus Wi-Fi. That also is a big politics and big issue. You were there. That if you have a cable, then there is this kind of disaster situation. You are much more functional than Wi-Fi. Shutting down Wi-Fi is much more easier. And you have multiple service providers, then it is always better. Our telcos have almost got monopolized. Where the privates are not there, only BSNL is there. And wherever the privates are there, BSNL intentionally non-functional.
Yeah. 65,000 poles of BSNL were given free of cost to Jio.
Yeah. So, and the other last part of the internet shutdown is that we are not seeing a public outcry on internet shutdown for some reason. Only activists are talking about it, civil society, organization are talking about it. And this is my general complaint to each and every digital barriers, is that there is no mass public outcry. I mean, there is no dharna, there is no agitation, there is no those kind of, 5,000 people saying that, I'm not going to eat today because the internet shutdown is not, is not there. I don't know, it's not happening. And that is where my concern is, that internet shutdown is going to happen more and more. The reason I am saying is that once you give public infrastructure in the hands of people, the only way to control is to shut down. It's something like if you have a road to almost all villages, the only way to is that create barriers. What do you do? Either you make it slow or so control becomes much more easier that way. So on one side, I would say Digital India is saying that connectivity should go everywhere. Now the latest announcement is that so many lakh of villages have been announced to have household level of connectivity without having BharatNet successful, by the way. Without having BharatNet success. BharatNet basically promises you to go up to the panchayat level. Now even a panchayat level, 2,50,000 panchayat, only 1,25,000 or 35,000 or 1.5 lakh is functional, claimed to be functional. If you go and check it, it will show the Wi-Fi link, but it will not show data transfer. So without that, I don't even know how will I, if my pipe is there and non-functional up to certain level, how are we going to make functional the household? And that is the reason why I think Kerala chose to create its own ISP, the state ISP, to do their own BharatNet, to do their own connectivity. Santosh was supposed to come, but who is the CEO? They are doing their own. Telangana is working on their own last mile connectivity. Most of the people are going away to create their own connectivity or the last mile connectivity. But internet shutdown is something going to suffer because we are actually trying to create a totally consumeristic approach of providing, access to the people without claiming that we are going to create a public access point like PCU jaise hota tha. When PCU was announced and done, PCU was really a public space and you were paying. It is not that it was free, so it was sustainable. You go and make a call and you pay. But we don't have a similar situation because if you create public access point and announce internet shutdown, then you can easily note down and see that if you are coming to a public access point to use, to call or access, you are noted and you are seen, which is fine, But that is also not there. And that is the reason why internet shutdown, rather than just all the time we keep creating case studies and talking about it, we all need to figure out that how to find an alternative to internet shutdown and how to prevent internet shutdown. Because if we are going to be dependent on connectivity all the time, there will always be disaster. For some other, in Haryana and Bihar, they keep announcing there is going to be exam, that's why there is internet shutdown. This is like preventive internet shutdown. Wow, absolutely. I don't know if in one examination hall or even 20 examination hall will make the 20 cities having a certain internet shutdown. I just don't understand the control over technology or the management of technology.
But when you talk about internet shutdowns, there is, for example, internet shutdown is saying that I'm unable to get the news, right? As opposed to saying that I'm unable to talk to my mom, or to say that I'm unable to pay the bill. So, what is the nature of seriousness of each of these denials areas?
Like one of the things that also impacts circulation of news, because cable TV network is dominated by the capital city. Yeah, and the news from broadcasting as others. So there's no way for people to get the truth out, which is why that video also came much later. Because
I think there's another point that I would like to intervene here. Internet just happens to be symptomatic of another issue of local and democratic governance that we are talking about here, which is being used as a tool to ensure that the ability to communicate is getting affected. Please understand that internet is a tool for communication here, which allows a number of stories. Ability to communicate, duplicate both ways. Commerce, because you need to have your daily needs taken care of. There has to be a supply chain which has to be operational behind the entire story. There has to be communication of give and take, etc. Then there is a requirement for need and knowing of safety, the emotional needs which are there. Now here, because you are incarcerating the entire community because of your own ulterior motives, you are ensuring that the only source of communication that is available to the community, which happens to be the internet here, and being provided through a monopolistic provider, could be, or it could also be a combination of monopolistic and private sector partners, are being denied. So here, do we address this as a basic right of communication that the community needs, where internet is just a tool? Let us not lose the way in just thinking about some minor issues which are a part of living your life, because this is actually denial of basic living of life. That is what is being done in this entire process.
On that point, today we can, I think for the next generation, we need to clearly bring out the slogan that bandwidth is my birthright for everyone.
Yeah, that's what we talked about.
Just like energy access.
yeah, it was a 15-minute session and it will take longer time. Yeah, we don't have time, but
but that is true also with information. For example, the way in which the government has monopolized the ability of media to communicate with people at large is okay. There is a basic problem and flaw in the way in which the system is designed. We have to address it at that level.
But that it's also
unless you do that, we are just talking about irrelevant issues.
We'll close. now because we don't have time and they need a laptop upstairs. Like
So there's an infrastructure constraint as well.
There's no infrastructure constraint. The laptop is not. It's a 15-minute session. We close that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll have
Thank
to
you.
close here. Dailan is here.
Anybody who wants to pick up a copy, it is downloadable also. Those who cannot get a copy have a QR code, which is easy to carry. Yeah, please forward this to
Dylan,
copy
thank
to
you
the
so much
forward.
for joining us. We can't see you.
Anybody else want a copy? Yeah, forward. Bypass. So let's go down on fifth floor.
No,